Are we all ready to go? Very warm welcome to everyone for the NGI Forum. And today is a special day, as it is the first time we are hosting the Next Generation Internet Forum as a hybrid event. So a warm welcome for everyone in the room, and of course, as well as that, to those joining online. 2 years ago, for very sad and obvious reasons, it was entirely online, and before that, everything was entirely in person. So this year, we're hoping to have collaboration, communication, and real integration between both parties who are here in person and online. And to please do that, do use the hashtag NGI Forum 23 on the social media platform of your choice. There's plenty out there to choose from. And we will also be using the interaction tool Particify. I'll tell you more about that in a moment, but do keep your smartphones to hand and be ready with your fingers on keyboards. I'm Jennifer Baker, a tech policy journalist based here in Brussels, and I'm your guide through what is a very packed agenda over the next couple of days. We have keynote speeches, panel discussions, innovators' presentations and pitches, technical workshops, policy debates, and networking opportunities. They're all important networking. At a high level, the mission of the NGI is to reimagine and re-engineer the internet. Now, hands up if you think that's a tall order. Okay, but first of all, of course, what we have to do is define what we want to re-engineer it to, the outcomes, the desired aims. And I think in a nutshell, those are a safer, more open internet, more respectful of people, empowering end users and giving them control over their data and their digital identities, and more useful to citizens, because at the end of the day, it's what point is a tool if no one's going to use it for anything? So essentially, we want an internet of trust. So today and tomorrow, we're going to look at all of that, the big trends, the macro trends, the future technological transition of the internet, things like the digital commons, of course, decentralized social media. We'll be talking about digital identity, open source supply chain, supply security, web search, and large language models, to name but a few. So have your thinking caps on and bring plenty of energy to these discussions. Let's start with a look at what those macro trends might be and what trends most concern you. I mentioned Particify. We're going to use that now, so have your smartphones. It's an open source interaction tool, which we can host polls, word clouds, likes, and so on. It's a bit like Slido, that you may be all familiar with, that isn't open source. You can scan the QR code here on the screen if you're in the room, and those online, you have direct access to it straight through the portal. If you actually just want to go to ours, particify.de, you can put the code in 35070577. But this should work. So let's start with a word cloud. So the first question we're asking is, what words do you most associate with the next generation internet? Let's have a look at what people are saying. We should be able to see some of the words. I'm sure trust and open source are going to be among them. Absolutely. Metaverse, human-centric, empowering civil society, privacy, digital commons, Linux, personal, open, crypto. Trust is getting bigger and bigger. I'm sure private ones get bigger as well. Privacy, change, metaverse, empowerment, safe, human-centric. Green, I quite like. European law, security, data portability. I'll let that stand as it is. And now we'll ask, what are the biggest challenges to the next generation internet? Let's see if we can have a look at what the possibilities are on that word cloud. We have a second one here, not just the words that you want to associate with it, but the challenges. Right, it's going to take a second or two. So far, there are no challenges. That's great. We don't have to have a forum. We're good. There are no answers. I feel that's a rather telling statement there. What are the challenges? Anybody going to risk putting in a challenge? Oh, trust. One of the biggest benefits, also one of the biggest challenges. Data formats, of course. Apathy. Apathy, perhaps, in getting those first answers in. Capitalism, privacy, fear, corporations, vested interests, big tech. Okay, we'll let that simmer away there in the background. So that's a lot of the what. The other side of the coin is the how. So far, I got word today, the NGI initiative has funded more than 1,000 European innovative research projects on AI, cloud, 5G, networking, decentralized ledger technologies, and the projects cover a broad range of subjects from private search, instant messaging, remote working tools, health, energy, finance, all the big things that we care about. So the catalogue is updated online. I know last week it said 800, but today it's 1,000, so you can check that out on ngi.eu if you want to see some of those projects. So that's a very, very high-level introduction to the day. But the man who knows much more in detail about the introduction to today and the NGI initiative, please welcome to set the scene for us and whet our appetites, Director General of DG Connect in the European Commission, Roberto Viola.
Thanks very much. So I should be the one that knows. First of all, I'm very happy to be with you. I also welcome my friend Henri Verdier with us, one of the great minds of thinking openly and brightly about the future of the internet. So back in 2017, I was a bit reflecting with my team, all present here, how to make the internet work according to the initial idea that was the biggest step in terms of shared knowledge of mankind, the biggest democratic step towards, everyone having the possibility to say, to learn, to change the world for better. Things went wrong. Some would say massively wrong, others largely wrong, but the moment, some very bright entrepreneur understood that you could make a lot of money with the internet, then we started to see the problems. The internet started to break up in pillars, ecosystems, algorithms started to amplify what we like most, which is strange stories, not really true stories, horror stories, polarization of human beings. So the algorithms were very clever to exploit all our weaknesses, and those entrepreneurs were very clever to exploit those weaknesses to make more money. So we started to imagine the internet of the future. I was invited to a very prestigious lecture, and I gave a lecture about what I would see as the internet of the future. At that time, we called it Project Agora, in the meaning of a big place where people would really contribute. So openness of search being, governed by the community, using, cognitive search, so that resonates these days. Openness of the identity ecosystem. I am what I am because I am myself, not because I have an ID from a platform, from a commercial platform. Openness of creating value over the internet. Level playing field when it comes to small and big actors, equal opportunities. All of this was declined in a number of ideas, principles, and the overarching idea was to go on two tracks. On one side, try to put an end of the kind of unregulated internet when it comes to the very powerful companies, and the other is to create a community that would really, from the bottom, change the internet for better. And then from Project Agora, that I was told the word, we decided to call it Next Generation Internet and created this beautiful community that you belong to. This is the start of the story. Now, there's a kind of a new chapter of this story which is opening in front of us, is that basically the end of the era of mankind working with machines is over, and we are entering this era of mankind working with intelligent machines. So what we thought it would happen, it happened. For instance, logically and in a cognitive way, interacting with not only the web, but everything which is about knowledge, data, and understanding of the environment, decentralizing very much the architecture. All of this, in a way, happened. In the meantime, we were quite successful in regulating the internet space better than anybody else in the world. So internet neutrality, now DSA about fighting algorithmic amplification for commercial use. We are trying to land the regulation of artificial intelligence. But now what we see looming, unfortunately, it's the repeat of the problem we tried to fight at the beginning of this exercise, which is, again, we see the big companies that they are quicker to attract minds, capital, to be dominating now the scenery when it comes to the use of artificial intelligence to improve the internet experience. So indeed, internet is changing profoundly. Our experience with the internet will change dramatically. I mean, we will have our nice AI co-pilot with us, which will be our, let's say, friend for life. And I mean, this mediator, new mediator of the internet, these APIs, bots, these algorithms, will influence how people perceive the truth, how people learn, how people are directed toward one or the other idea. So they are not only relevant from the business point of view, they are relevant from the social point of view, from the democratic point of view. Now, of course, this is being addressed in the AI regulation, but that's cannot be the sole answer. The other answer is that the community that we have grown now reacts and is capable, I mean, to actually, through algorithms programmed in open source, to new ways of handling, I mean, security, to actually avoid that what we have seen repeats over and over, so the few dominant firms will be the one influencing the future of the internet. So it's a moment of reflection. Also, it's a moment of reflection because after many years of experience with NGI, now we have the duty to tell history what we have done collectively, and I think in balance, I'm very happy to say to history we have done the right things. But of course, this needs also your critical reflection where we are and how we can improve in the future. Now, two things that I would like to offer for reflection. The first one, I completely agree. A group of you, because the word became, and the word cloud, very big, apathy. I think the choice of being critical about what we observe and doing nothing is not a choice that we must accept. And I take one example, which is this new gigantic opportunity that we have, again as Europeans, to show the way to the world, which is creating an identity ecosystem which is open, federated, and able, I mean, to allow the citizens to handle who they are, what they want to do in the virtual world as very much they do in the real world. This is dubbed as the European Identity Wallet, which by legislation is born open source, is born as a community effort. Now, you can take two attitudes. I don't want to sit around until you have everything perfect, zero knowledge proof of every protocol, everything distributed on the web, that I really have the certainty that this is the kind of best in class. This is one attitude. The other attitude is that, but this is just a continuation of government business. It's just for government, we organize it, and it will go well. Both models, for me, are bringing to only one result, that the only one that will exploit and gain on our identity transactions will be the big tech, again and again. Because one attitude, the community should not move until everything is perfect, leads to the fact that then, I mean, commercial product will continue to go, and we'll watch. Because we have, in the internet, a strange phenomena, which is we tend to trust much more the capitalists in the Silicon Valley than the elected people in governments. Of course, as Europeans, we have an history which is trusting, I mean, the elected in the past was not, or the non-elected even, I mean, was not exactly simple or was proven to be wrong. But it's, if you like, it's a bit bizarre that you, I mean, as a citizen, kind of give your personal life, give everything to somebody exploiting it for money, and, I mean, you don't make an effort to change from inside the way public services are organized. That's why I'm saying we should be open and very, very attentive to all critics of open source in governments, of the way to do, I mean, things differently in the public sphere. But I think we have the duty to try to change from the bottom the way we work, because if we do that, then we have, I mean, what it should be, because in the real life, of course, who is expected to give you public services, schooling, healthcare, or the rest comes from the public sphere. So the simply say, I renounce to change it, because until, I mean, somebody gives me the perfect mathematical proof that nothing can happen to me, then I don't move. It's not the option or choice. And I think this community should embrace now the challenge of the European identity framework to invent, to create, and also, and that applies to the second topic I want to discuss with you, to be the whistleblowers. We have done it with you during the COVID pandemic with the so-called contact tracing app, with the COVID certificate. We published it on GitHub and invited the community to comment and to actually screen, because we, from day one, wanted everything to be open source. So I think for whatever we will do around managing identity, attributes, which is the essence of a distributed web, we will work, we want to work with the community. And that's something, thank you. So rest reassured that everything will be not only published in GitHub, commented and open source, but there will be specific projects, specific investments that we'll do with you to create this ecosystem. And the second is artificial intelligence, large models. The discussions about the AI Act are still going on, but the emerging idea about governance is basically, we will look at the kind of vertical governance for products and say, look, if a product is high risk, in the meaning, I mean, it's about the health of people, the safety of people, the democracy of people, should go under a kind of screening and qualification. And then a kind of horizontal systemic risk about large models. And here the idea is that, a bit like it happens in cybersecurity, the community should act as a whistleblower. So today there are no standards about safety and security of very large algorithms. Today, even those that produce this algorithm tell, help us because they are risky. Now, it sounds to me like the anonymous alcoholist. They go around the table, they say, help me to stop drinking because I cannot do it alone. So those are the companies that are getting hundreds of millions of dollars from the capital market to develop this algorithm. They come to the government and say, but I cannot control what's going on. It's a paradox that I don't think we can accept, frankly speaking. I mean, with being very powerful and doing a lot of money comes responsibility towards the society. And once again, I think this community is the community that we want to be on our side, to be the whistleblowers in artificial intelligence, and spot and allow us. And of course, in perspective, develop the standards, the possibility to be also a little bit more looking ex ante at those algorithms, but for the time being, I mean, also act as a whistleblower. We are opening our supercomputers. Europe made a huge investment in public supercomputing, in the biggest of the world, so you don't need to have a friend on a big tech to test your algorithm. You can come to a public supercomputing center in Europe as a startup and do this. And once again, we line now to get a little bit closer, the NGI community with our supercomputing community, and allow everyone to have the tools to test and the algorithms you want to test, and also to verify, third party, because this is also a challenge for democracy. We want to make sure that content is watermarkable, so that we recognize the content of AI. We want to make sure that certain patterns are fully described, and the community knows about every single flow and discusses about this. This made, for instance, the aviation community strong, because nothing can be hidden in aviation. And this makes every day more safe to fly. So, in a way, it's NGI community is still a baby. Few years old, but still strong. So long live to this. But this is a moment of responsibility, a moment of reflection, a moment where the word apathy should not be in our dictionary. Many thanks.
Well, thank you, Roberto. I think from that round of applause, we're not going to have any apathy in the room over the next couple of days. We shall stamp it out for you. We're going to talk next a lot about the digital commons. Now, as we know, a digital commons is essential for a knowledge revolution, if that's what we want to see, fostering collaboration. Luckily, here in Europe, we have a long and proud tradition as the birthplace of many of the open standards and protocols upon which we can base our commons. And in 19 member states just adopted the report towards a sovereign digital infrastructure of the commons just last year. But you don't want me to tell you about that. So we are delighted to welcome Henri Verdier, Ambassador at Large for Cyber and Digital of France, basically formerly France's state CTO, Chief Technology Officer, a man who has led many a working group on open source and who will inspire us all for the next couple of days. Henri, please take to the stage.
Thank you very much. I know that you all speak French, but I'm supposed to speak English today. Maybe I just want to start with saying that, as usually, I'm totally aligned with what Director Viola said, except maybe one question. Today, I don't know if the big AI companies are saying, please help us to stop drinking, or if they are saying, please close the door behind us, we are too dangerous. You can regulate 5 companies, but not hundreds. So, lesson to learn there. To come back to what I'm supposed to say, first, I'm delighted to be there to the Next Generation Internet Forum. This is such a valuable initiative to carry Europe's voice in supporting an open, inclusive, trustworthy digital ecosystem. And that's really an honor for me. And I would like to thank the European Commission and the entire community for their work and commitment. And I wanted to start with a question, but you did quite kill my question. Do you know what packet routing, GSM, HTML, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, MySQL, or Linux have in common? They are all created by Europeans. In a way, I think that we can really say that Europe is the birthplace of the digital revolution, because the Valley did just start big tech, but we did conceive all the frameworks, the infrastructures, the principles, and this reality, which we must recognize and reclaim, is rooted, from my perspective, in a long European tradition. In my view, it has something to do with the Enlightenment. In France, for example, to start with a long story, it is not a coincidence that one of the first decisions of the French Revolution was the introduction of the metric system. And it was done to stimulate innovation and growth in this young republic, because they thought that good standards, shared standards, less divergence, etc., was better for business. And nor was it by chance that in 1865, the Emperor Napoleon III convened the Paris Telegraph Conference, where the International Telegraph Convention was adopted, between 20 European states. So I have to consider that there were 7 German states, because they were little kingdoms, that the UK was not there because they thought that the telegraph was a private issue. Reuters was a big company, as they didn't want the government to interfere, but the other European states decided that a world with good shared open standards was good for knowledge, for communication, for peace, and for business. And they did create the International Telegraph Union, which became the ITU, and which is one of the 2 first international organizations and the oldest body of the UN system. It was born in Europe with this view that we need to build our societies on proper and clear standards and infrastructure. So I deeply believe that this is part of our DNA, this idea that good and open standards and good and open public infrastructure, free software, open data, are essential resources for democracy and for economic prosperity. That's my first point. But of course, with the digital revolution, something new has happened, because states have lost their monopoly on public infrastructure. We discovered that innovators, companies, small groups of activists, or even communities with millions of contributors could also build this kind of resources. And that's what digital commons are. Digital commons are freely reusable immaterial goods produced and managed by an open community of actors sharing collective values and rules. And they can be free software, like I did mention, Linux, MySQL, open standards, TCP/IP, DNS, web, Bluetooth, open data and content, Wikipedia, OpenStreetMap, software building bricks that can be exploited for new solutions, or even sometimes physical infrastructures. So just to mention this, not all public goods are commons, and nor all open source solutions. I'm not saying this to pit them against each other, but to say that we need the 3 approaches, and to remind us that we need to pay attention to this important new political object, the digital commons. A common is a resource, freely accessible, governed by its community of contributors. A resource that is neither a private property nor state-owned. And as I told you, I feel that they are at the public core, not only of internet, but also of the digital age. And here I'd like to share with you another very strong conviction. We are living in this digital world where code is law, infrastructure is politics. And in this world, regulation is very important, but it's not enough. We need to adopt a kind of techno-legal approach. We need to add to the very important European regulation framework that is really very important, but we need to add to this the tools and resources for the autonomy of each, and thus contribute to rebalancing this space and enforce our regulation. And that's why I think that the big question now is how can we forge new alliances with this world that has seen us lose a monopoly, but gain powerful allies? How can we protect it, this world of commons, since it is under threat from certain big tech and certain big states? How can we protect it and ourselves from from new attempts to recapture our economy through so-called open approaches, which is a new brilliant strategy from some big companies? And can we avoid new forms of lock-in? As Europeans, I think that we have a triple responsibility to do this: political, economic, and geopolitical. Politically, because those commons are essential to guarantee the quality and neutrality of a digital public space, which offer possibilities for participation, civic engagement, access to trusted information and knowledge. And as we can obviously see, this cannot depend on only a few actors, especially those kind of actors. So that's a very important part of our commitment. But by the way, the very existence of digital commons is also a good reference for global digital governance, because it does prove that multi-stakeholder, transparent, shared, and inclusive governance works. And when we will have to fight for this in the UN system soon, we will have this reference that we will be able to share. There is also an economic responsibility because from an economic point of view, those commons serve the innovators, the innovation of developers and the industry more broadly. They are a powerful resource for innovators. They enable economies of scale, thanks to the sharing and reuse of certain tools. And they contribute to build an environment that protects innovators from the lock-in of certain large platforms. And they are a guarantee against the risk of rogue intermediaries. Because if you do observe how the digital economy is evolving, you have a lot of intermediaries that pretend to work for the seller and the customer and work for them. So we need to pay attention to this small layer of interface, which can be done through digital public infrastructure, digital commons, but we have to take back the control on this very small, important piece. And of course, there is a geopolitical reason because from a geopolitical approach, as I told you, this is a very European view, this idea that we can cooperate in a transparent manner through shared responsibilities in a multi-stakeholder way. To be frank, we are the only continent that defends it as it. The Valley don't care, China don't like it, Africa just wants connection. So we are the continent with the UN system that protects this. That's our legacy, so we have to protect this. And that's, from my perspective, the future. And when I say that there is a geopolitical approach, first, we have to fight this fight as Europeans all together. And we have to convince, especially emerging countries, Africa, Latin America, ASEAN, that this is the best way. And I propose to you to say the first way. The idea that this is the third way between China and the Valley is not the reality. The reality is that this is the history of internet, the history of Europe. This is why the digital revolution did happen. This is the first way. So there is a first way and two mistakes, and we have to stand at the middle in the first way. Thank you. So I hope that we all agree that those questions are fundamental and that Europe must do its best to protect and support the resources it has created, which are essential to its independence and sovereignty. So if we want to succeed in unlocking the power of digital commons, it's time to act. And regarding action, I would just love to share with you 4 ideas. So first, as I said, digital commons must become again the first way. We need to promote open models for new technologies, especially for artificial intelligence. This means, for example, providing greater access to data and encouraging the development of open source libraries. And I feel sometimes, very often, that as Europeans, we have something else in common. We trust states and governments, and we have basically good administration. So the Gov stack could be a good place, first to learn to cooperate each other to become really interoperable. So we should build our Gov stacks on open source standards, pay attention to the interoperability, and then export this model and build interoperability passerelles with emerging economies. Because this is one of our strengths. We have good states, good administration, not so bad Gov stacks. The second point is to support this movement, including financially, because I'm not the first to say that we believe in open source, we are the continent of transparency, so it's time to take some money and to help those ecosystems. And the European Commission, through its program, is involved in this field, is doing an excellent work. So it's probably time for the member states to complete this engagement. And that's why in 2022, during the French presidency of the Council, 19 member states, as you said, adopted a recommendation aimed at promoting and supporting digital commons. And these recommendations call for creating a digital commons one-stop shop. I just mentioned this because when you do observe carefully, there are hundreds of shops in Brussels, but also in every member state. And if you are an entrepreneur, a commoner, you will spend 3 or 6 months just to find the good for you. So if we could help them to find where to ask for money, we can save 6 months. The second is to launch a call for commons proposals. And the third is to establish a European Foundation for Digital Commons. Here also there is something important because if we believe that this movement is a way for our sovereignty, we have strong allies in the US, of course, Apache Foundation and others, Mozilla Foundation, but we don't have any strong European body to be part of this movement. So we'll have to find allies in the US, in the Valley, again, to tackle the Valley. So probably it's time to take our responsibilities and to build something in Europe. So I did prepare a long, but I won't tell it to you, presentation about where we are, but to be frank, we are working, we are progressing, we are still looking for money from member states, but it is arriving, slowly but seriously, and I hope that we'll seize the opportunity of the program of edX to launch, I don't know, next year, an edX dedicated to this important progress. Sorry, 4, needs 5. Voila. And so I did say it's time to act. We need to put this first way at the middle of our views. We need to be able to support it financially. We need to think in terms of geopolitics. We need to build coalitions. And for this, I want to say that that's just an example of what's happening in India, and Director Viola, you are there, like me, at the G20, is important. And maybe let's recognize that in terms of conception, architecture, deployment, they are very strong. Probably at least like us, maybe a bit better. So it's time to respect them too. And of course, I'm not suggesting to build Europe within the Indian stack, but if we don't pay attention to be interoperable, we are stupid. And if we have an interoperable market of 2 billion people, so Europe alone is strong. We can resist. If you want to impose your views, you need a broader coalition. That's my view. Of course, that's just my personal view. So it's time to think in terms of alliances, and of course to really pay attention to what's happening in Africa, and to be frank, to share our values and our models and our solutions, our technologies. If we don't make this in, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, Africa will be built on Chinese infrastructure with a Beijing data center, or on within Facebook or Amazon infrastructures. And that's just the momentum. We have 10 years. And then it will be too late. And it won't be a good news neither for Africa nor for Europe if we let them to be locked in those kind of infrastructure. I'm not reading my paper anymore, so I'm going fast. Just to conclude, 2 things. Again, just because the digital commons were at the root of the digital revolution doesn't mean it's an old idea. It did change the world once. All the internet revolution is because of this movement of open standards and open software and cooperation. And the biggest threat now is the end of this movement of openness. What we are observing is a real risk of not this stupid conversation around the internet fragmentation when they do accuse us to fragmentize the internet because of the GDPR. This is completely stupid. Internet was from the beginning a network of networks with a diversity, and the legal regulation has nothing to do with the main infrastructure. But the locking through private systems, through private standards, through state-owned standards, this is a big risk. And you have to be there at the middle to promote the fact that it did work for 50 years. That's the future. That's also the future of the digital revolution. For this, as I told you, we need also financial support and democratization of the digital commons. This is essential. And before ending, I could end here, but I must stress, and it was mentioned, that with the AI development, everything, but every challenge I did mention will come back even stronger. So we'll have to pay attention again to the issues of openness, permissionless innovation, good architecture that embodies our values, transparency, sovereignty, democracy. Everything will be exacerbated, and this is our next common challenge. Thank you very much.
Henri, thank you very much indeed for that inspirational talk, which I hope has whetted our appetite, because we are now moving on to our first plenary. So this plenary is called Towards Digital Commons, Charting the Course for Europe's Digital Future. The panel is going to discuss the opportunities and the challenges, and of course we know that there are many challenges in the development and maintenance of a digital commons in Europe. The current investment schemes at national and European level we're also going to have a look at, and the possible avenues for a European approach to further stimulate the existing community of commoners. So a lot to cover and just 1 hour to do it. So I'm delighted to welcome, to moderate that, taking the weight on her shoulders, to Monique Calisti, who is the CEO of Martel Innovate. Monique, thank you very much. I'm also going to introduce your speakers, so if they could please join me on stage. We have Michel Lenars, Director of Strategy at NLNet Foundation. Adriana Guo is the co-founder of the Sovereign Tech Fund. Sophie Blumen, Director of the Commons Network. Gabriele Colombo, the General Manager of Linux Foundation Europe. And joining us remotely online, very appropriately, I think, for the International Telecommunication Union, we have David Manset, Senior Project Coordinator. Thank you all for being here. Have a good conversation. I remind everyone you can use that Particify to put your questions, and we'll try and coordinate, Monique, to get those to our speakers, but you can take it away, please.
Thank you, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me stand up for a second so that I can see you better. It's a great pleasure to be here with you all, with these excellent experts that will help us discuss a little bit more into the digital commons aspects that somehow were already touched upon by Henri Verdier. What we want to do with this discussion is to touch upon some major commons initiatives that our esteemed panelists will be talking about, and understand what is their key role in ensuring technology sovereignty in Europe, but also what is their role in ensuring that we grow the vision and we ensure the creation of a human-centric internet. There are gaps, there are challenges, there are opportunities, and we will discuss those with them. There will be a chance for you to put your questions on Particify. We can also take some here, but let me first give our speakers a couple of minutes. Please, I will be a little bit strict with timing, to introduce yourself and tell us why you're here in this panel. Gabriele, I would like to start with you, and then we go on until Michel.
Thank you, Monique. Nice to meet you. I'm Gabriele Columbro. I'm the General Manager of Linux Foundation Europe. We launched Linux Foundation Europe about a year ago. Maybe you guys are familiar with the Linux Foundation, but we do more than just Linux. The Linux Foundation hosts projects like Kubernetes, Node, Electron, PyTorch, over 800 projects. And we launched last year in Europe to really build and support the vision of the digital commons as well as European priorities. As you can hear, I have a thick Italian accent. Hopefully that's not the only reason why I'm running Linux Foundation Europe. And I'm here for a couple of reasons. I hope to bring the expertise that we built over time in sort of building global open source communities and openly governed communities. And my second role is running the FinTech Open Source Foundation under the Linux Foundation. And so I've had a lot of experience in bringing together private sector, actually very conservative private sector like banks, with the public sector and individual contributors. And so hopefully that's another sort of expertise that I can share today. Did I keep it under 2 minutes?
Thank you, Gabriele. Perfect, perfect timing. Please, Sophie.
Thank you, Monique. Yeah, my name is Sophie. So I'm director of Commons Network, and we are a think tank and collaboratory working on new economy and socio-ecological transition, and digital commons and digital public infrastructure are a big part of that, where we've done a lot of idea development and civil society coalition building to kind of bridge these practices and ideas with policy making since 2014. And I'm really happy that that the European Commission is embracing this digital commons and investing in co-creating this ecosystem, and kind of very different than kind of this mandate of fixing market failure, so to say. So I think that's really this requires this co-creating of another ecosystem really requires imagination and vision and going beyond what is there. Embracing this, what I want to stress today is that embracing the digital commons and the digital commons is not just about technology, about protocols and code and licenses and algorithms. It's about our economy and about how we govern it and who it serves. And in that respect, we can't really separate the digital transition from the green transition. They have to go hand in hand, and because the digital commons offer a lot of hold a lot of potential for that, because they require a value shift toward collaborative, democratic, and regenerative practices. So, and then related to that, I don't know how my 2 minutes are going, but related to that, I think. We shouldn't, I think this was also highlighted already by the last speakers, but we shouldn't conflate the technical solutions with the political solutions. And I think the change we need to see is first and foremost, political, economical. And that's again where digital commons offer a lot of potential. So that's where I would like to talk a bit about today.
Thank you very much, Sophie. We will come back to some of the points you mentioned. Absolutely. Adriana?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Adriana Groh. I'm based in Berlin and co-founded the Sovereign Tech Fund. We also just launched last year. We turned 1 in September, so it's a pretty new, initiative. It's together with the Ministry for Economic Affairs in Germany, and the name is a bit misleading because we're technically not a fund. We're investing public money in open digital infrastructure in the public interest. We heard a bit about this history of the internet from Henri, and I think it's important to stress that belief that this infrastructure needs to be open, secure, accessible for everyone. That means administration as much as civil society and industry. And we're not having a really defined role nor the instruments to do that as public bodies, governments, anywhere. And this is exactly why we set up the Sovereign Tech Fund, to test approaches and to provide maybe a blueprint for how this job of maintaining this infrastructure for everyone, in everyone's interest in the future. So that's what we're working on right now in Berlin, but we're also working a lot on the European level, internationally, because it's an international topic, and I'm happy to talk more about this today.
Thank you very much, Adriana. Michiel.
I am Michiel Leenaars, I'm Director of Strategy at NLNet Foundation. NLNet is a nice bit of internet history. It dates back to the 1980s, 1982 to be precise, to the very earliest pioneers of the internet. And so, in a sense, it's just a continuation for us. I'm not a founder of NLNet. I came there when the first generation retired. So we're already working on digital commons that long. We just used to call it open, free and open source software, open standards, open science, open data. And so digital commons is just a very convenient short name for all of that. And I would say that I don't represent the government. I represent the developer community, if anybody can represent them, and the user community and the citizens, to have essentially worked towards a user-operated internet and to a user-defined technology stack. And I guess the reason why I'm here is because we've, at the NGI Foundation, we've been funding a lot of these efforts in the last decades. And in the recent years, we've been very active in the Next Generation Internet initiative. So when I hear people read the words reimagine and re-engineer the internet, I'm very happy, because that comes from the study that we did for the European Commission back in 2018. Well, I'm super stoked that we have now 1,000 projects, that we exist for 5 years, that we're really changing, showing that even small amounts can change a lot of things. Because there was a quote here that Elon Musk makes decisions. I was so proud that the European Commission moved to Mastodon and PeerTube in the same week when Elon Musk bought Twitter. So they weren't responding to that when they did that. They were going where they were where the ball was moving, and I think that's really looking ahead. And I think if we can keep that up, if we can go where the semiconductor industry needs to go, following the lead of the individual people. If we can go to where social media need to go, following the lead of the individual people, then we have a whole continent that leads us the way.
Thank you, Michel. I would like to give the floor now to David. David, can you hear us?
I hear you pretty well. I don't know if you hear me well as well.
Yes, please go ahead.
Perfect. So thank you very much for this invitation to contribute to today's very interesting panel on digital commons. I am David Manset from ITU, the International Telecommunication Union, which is the oldest UN agency in charge of a number of matters related to information and communication technologies, amongst which the shared global use of radio spectrum, facilitating international collaboration in satellite orbits, coordinating worldwide technical standards, but also coordinating projects in ICT in the developing world. I will contribute today to the discussion from a particular angle, as I am coordinating a new project which is actually funded by the European Commission, which is called the Open Source Ecosystem Enablement. It is a project under the Global Challenges thematic program, which aims at supporting the development of digital public goods using open source technologies. And therefore, we are enrolling a full program to support countries in adopting and further developing open source and open resources that they may use in their public services developments. I'm mentioning digital public goods because I believe from the definition of the digital commons that digital public goods may well be a subset, an important subset of the digital commons in the near future. So I will talk about our ongoing works and our views on the importance of certain aspects in the development of digital commons, and in particular the use of open source technologies and open resources.
Thank you very much, David. Actually, we've touched upon several aspects. They also resonate with what Mr. Henri Verdier told us before. We will pick up some questions, but first I would like to enter a little bit into some of the points that maybe can generate a little bit of discussion and flow along the panel. So one of the first things that I think would be interesting to discuss, because I know that there might be divergent views, is whether for you commons means open by definition, and whether closed commons differentiate by open commons, and how. So we had this, in the preparation of this panel, we started some of these discussions, and I know that there are some divergent views, so I would like to, maybe Sophie, you can start, because...
Well, it's always tricky to get into the definition of the commons, but I think it is important to recognize that open and commons are not the same thing. You know, I think that's actually quite obvious. And of course, commons are traditionally very much about a closed system of a community you know, governing democratically a certain good or a certain resource in a democratic way. So, and in knowledge, I think the principles are a little bit different. And there's different sorts of knowledge commons, or digital commons, and there's different traditions in that as well. There's a Yochai Benkler is an important part of the tradition, but there's always also, which is more about open commons. But there's also opposing views. And I think if you think about data commons, for example, where actually you want to govern data in a way that benefits the community, and you want to take decisions about the data, but you maybe not want to share with the entire world these data. You may want to share them to benefit the public good, or you want to share them to benefit science, or you maybe just want to share within your community. So I think a data commons is a good way of maybe thinking about a commons, digital commons that is different. And I think there's also a risk, of course, in open, where for now, this openness has benefited mostly, to a large extent, has benefited big tech and the sharing of all our data with big tech, which have then centralized the economy even more. So I think we have to be a little bit critical when thinking about that. Yeah.
Gabriele, do you want to add anything? I see you nodding.
Sure. I mean, I do have a slightly different view on this. So if you're looking for some divergence, probably that's a good question. Especially in the context of digital commons, for me, there is a strong overlap between open source data, hardware, standards, and what the digital commons should be. I do think that the concept, though, that it's not, I guess, often talked about, and I think some of the previous panelists touched on it, is the concept of open governance. I think it means very different things to different folks. If you ask a politician, open governance really goes more towards open government. In the open source community, and really the basic role of foundations like us is to ensure a level playing field across the different stakeholders, whether it is corporate, whether it is individual contributors. And I argue that one area where we should be doing better as foundations, and hopefully inviting the public sector in being an active participant in the governance of a project. I want to sort of make an example. Some of you might be familiar with a company called HashiCorp, who changed their license recently on one of their projects. And that's perfectly fine. The project was open source, but they had all the sort of copyright rights to change the license of the project. There's nothing wrong inherently about what they did. I mean, I personally don't like it, but they had all the rights to do it. That wouldn't happen if, in addition to sort of open source, you add open governance. And so when I think about the digital commons, and I mean, Harry mentioned sort of the need to create a foundation to really govern the digital commons, I really think that the biggest challenge here is to find sort of venues for which the public sector can actually not just be a consumer, but be an active participant beyond funding. I mean, of course, NGI does a lot of funding and a lot of sort of then trying to measure and sort of foster the ecosystem. But I do think, if you ask me, kind of going back to the question, yes, digital commons for me should be open, and not just open source, but actually truly openly governed across private, public sector, and individuals.
So out of what you said, let me ask David. I saw him somehow expressing the will to say something, and it relates very much also to the fact that with your projects and in your role, you're dealing a lot with the public role of digital commons and how they can really unleash some strong power there. David?
Yeah, well, yes, thank you for intervene. My opinion may be a little biased, but because I am representing a project that is actually addressing the needs for digital public goods, therefore the citizens. But my feeling is that when we talk about digital commons, we talk about digital resources that are for a given community. But in the present case, the community is actually worldwide. This is us, this is all of us. So we may have for the coming years a number of digital commons developing with a rather limited or nationally limited coverage, but in the end what we are aiming for with the digital commons is to address the needs of our citizens, I think. And so in that case, my take on that is that we'll have to rely on more and more open resources to develop such commons, because they are in the end, they will be in the end used for everyday decision making, for providing good public services, for supporting the citizens worldwide. So that means that they should be auditable, they should be transparent, they should rely on unbiased data, they should make it possible to understand if you are using, for instance, open source, if you are using, for instance, artificial intelligence models for supporting these digital commons, that may mean that we'll have to be able to explain the outcomes of these services to the commoners. So to me, digital commons imply an important usage of open resources to this end.
Thank you, David. I see that Adriana would like to add something.
Yeah, just one sentence, because I was cutting myself short in the introduction because I'm cautious of the time, but you picked that up about this is an international topic, and we need to think about the, let's say, production means of the software that we're developing. And I didn't say that, but what the Sovereign Tech Fund does at the moment is looking at software that developers need to develop software, which is often completely overlooked, but it needs to be in the focus as well if you want to have a holistic approach to designing the internet of the future and having digital commons that are for everyone and have a certain quality. So just adding this thought here, because often we forget the things that are even more invisible to most of us than the thing that is already invisible if we're not using it with an interface.
Michel, what is your insider's view on this?
Well, can I first make, because I was triggered actually by what was said before, is that NGI is an awesome program. We've seen a lot of things happening, and it is dwarfed by a contract in terms of financial thing, a contract that the Commission just made to put a European cloud, Oracle cloud, on the basis of all its technology. And I'm thinking that what Henri Verdier said is that if we want to mainstream these things, if we want to have access all areas, if we want to have the commons as, commons aren't governed, commons are there, and people can visit them, and people can use them, and we shouldn't exhaust them, but we should add to them and grow them. And I think what we've been doing in the last couple of years is nurturing a lot of new meadows up in the mountains, or whatever your favorite pastoral idea of a commons is. But trying to build these new ecosystems, trying to grow these additional commons, and not consider them as something where there's a zero-sum game. There can be a lot more, and I think just we have to be mindful of, well, if you know that some of the AI was trained with Creative Commons. So imagine people give their children's pictures to other people, saying, hey, if you want to make a brochure, you can put my kid in front of your magazine, because we all need these, and you don't have to pay these nasty companies. And all of a sudden, your kid is now the training data for an AI. And when that AI is asked to produce a picture, it will produce a picture not of your kid, but perhaps very much eerily looking like your kid. And the fact that we're conflating all of these commons into a single digital commons, I think when we're looking at the longer term, we need to do better in provisioning ourselves and making sure that what we give is actually what we want to give, and that what we use is actually used wherever it can, rather than have a niche where we have, for instance, we have the best VPN technology on the planet. It's created by a European project, funded by NGI. It's not in use with most governments, I would say no governments in Europe. Can we make those things happen? I think that is the kind of, where the commons should be common. everywhere.
So thank you, Michiel. But here I think you touched upon, in several ways, what has been called the tragedy of the digital commons, right? It was unavoidable to touch upon this point because in the moment you open up, you share, you collectively expect that the whole community contribute. Of course, in this community you might have several entities, whether it's individuals or organizations, that can jeopardize all of a sudden the community in the wrong direction. And this is happening. Many digital tech many big giants are hiding behind so-called open source let's say, commoning initiatives. So how can we really ensure that on the one hand, digital commons grow with collective support, collective participation, and on the other hand, we protect with regulations, with fiscal maneuvers, with, you know, I would like to hear your viewpoints, and you have different experiences, so I would like to touch on all of you on this.
There's a quick answer to that. There's a license that the European Commission paid for and developed, which is called the EU Public License, the EUPL. And actually Google, on its list of things that people cannot use inside the company, have two licenses, the Athero GPL license and the EUPL. So we have the weapon in place. We just need to make sure that we tell people when we order stuff, when we procure stuff as a government, we say we want that license on it, because that gives you a lot of protections. And so it's again, what I mentioned, choosing what you give and then the conditions under which you give it, rather than just put it out in some license where everything goes, because essentially the machinery that is Facebook or Meta, that is Alphabet / Google, they're all built on free and open source software. They have magic sauce on top of it, but the core basis is what we gave them. So they've weaponized what we gave, and we cannot get it back. And the licensing is what gives us that right to claim it back.
Okay, Adriana?
I think the answer to your question is a puzzle that has many pieces, and unfortunately there's not one solution that's going to solve it. So I think what you just said is one very critical point. What we think is part of the answer is that we need to think totally differently about this thing that is out there and we can all use, and that's great. I know there are ups and downs to that comparison, but as governments, usually, we don't ask, okay, do we need to invest in our physical infrastructure this year? We just ask, how much money do we need? And coming from Germany, we didn't invest a lot of money for some time, and then we had this massive backlog of broken bridges and streets, and it was all in a very bad shape, and that was bad for the economy, and that was bad for the people. They grew frustrated. And that's what happens if you do not invest in the public interest in something that is commonly used by the public. So we don't have a geographical boundary around this for that topic, like with physical infrastructure, but it's the same principle. So we say, actually, we need to think differently about this. It cannot be done just by volunteers, and it should not be paid for just by companies. The question is not who needs to get out of this, it's like, how many more actors do we need to bring in? And the government or public bodies representing, in a democratic public political system, the general public, they should be in there. They should have a role that is ongoing to support this really critical field. Because it's also not sustainable anymore. Like, the people who do that job are a very small group compared to the people who rely on them doing their job, and that worked fine for a long time. I might say we're not great as the human race in general to deal with the commons. Sometimes we do a good job, but sometimes we don't. And in this case, I think we did a really good job. Like, people volunteer their time over decades to support this ecosystem, but maybe that's not what we should rely on, just on that forever, because it's not fair. And companies, they don't have the task to represent all of us. They have a different task, which is also fair. So we need to bring more actors in, and we need to have the right instruments to really invest in a sustainable digital common for all of us in the future. Otherwise, we're going to get in big trouble, I'm afraid to say.
Thank you, Adriana. Sophie, please.
So thank you for that question. I think this idea of the tragedy of the commons is always had. The debunk is, of course, that it wasn't really about the commons. This is about an open access regime where everybody can just take whatever they want and there's no responsibility. And the commons is about stewarding something with the community. And so I think it's helpful to think about also the term that David used is what you call public goods, digital public goods, right? And about digital public goods and digital public infrastructure on the one hand, and digital commons on the other hand, and how these interact with each other. I think it's really important that the role of the government, of the state, is really important to provide for this public digital infrastructure and work together with commoners, with communities that then populate this digital infrastructure, together with maybe more traditional businesses. So, like you said, there's many pieces of the puzzle. I think interoperability is one other piece of the puzzle. Not, between these public institutions and these commoners, these digital commons, for example, so that you create this different ecosystem. And I think it's, in that sense, this transformation also has to do to digital commons has to do as well with other diverse ownership structures, right? Like was mentioned before, it's not private, it's not the state, it's a different ownership structure, it's a collective ownership, it's collective governance. So there's different practices, and I think we have to remember that as well. And there's a lot of opportunities there, also in a kind of more physical economy. One example that's often heard is that of platform cooperatives. Of course, we're all familiar with the gig economy, Uber, which is taking over infrastructure, undermining some of our social democratic achievements in terms of work standards. And platform cooperatives have the potential to offer an alternative to that. And they are cooperatives that organize themselves, for example, to deliver food or to provide taxi service. But they use open source software to manage their app, their clients, their data. So their digital commons, data commons, is used as well as infrastructure in this alternative economy. So I think that's a kind of a telling example of how we can transition.
Thank you. Gabriele and then David.
So I agree with Adriana that there's no one weapon. I don't know that a license is a weapon in and of its own. It's certainly, license is a tool that fit for different purposes. I was, as an Italian living in California, I guess that the Italian part of California, I was super interested to hear Harry listing all the technologies that were created by Europeans. One it got me thinking, oh, that's kind of like when I try to explain my American friends that a phone was invented by Meucci and not by Bell. And this feels a little bit like a similar thing. Like we've had so many technologies invented by Europeans and monetized by Americans. Now, I feel that I go back to, maybe I'm being an optimist here, and maybe because I see in many of our foundations and sub-foundations cooperation between, again, big tech, individual contributors, but there's a couple of examples that make me think that, again, the digital commons needs to be sustainable in the sense that markets need to be created around it, and that means then being able to sustain the individual contributors that participate, as well as the startup ecosystem that is built on it. A couple of examples, I think, cloud is a huge example that is very centralized, but there's, it's a $5 billion market right now. It's supposed to be a $42 billion market in 2032. And there's plenty of cloud native startups across the world. Again, I want to absolutely say that we can do better, that we can, I don't want to say that there's no cloud vendor lock-in problem. Let's be clear. But I think that has created a whole market. My experience with the banks is that, and you sort of touched on it, open source is a positive-sum game. I think there is a way for them to align the drivers and have them be effectively selfishly altruistic, meaning they're in the open source community to do their own thing, but ultimately the fact that we're able to make them work in open source delivers value to sort of the digital public good and broader downstream. And I think one example that I'm super excited about, which again, it all goes back to open governance and bringing all the different players into this governance framework, is the Open Wallet Foundation. It's one of the projects under Linux Foundation Europe. Look, again, call me an optimist, but that is really why I like big challenges. You know, we now have a government advisory council that is trying to help and align not just with the EU reference implementation, but more broadly, and Google and Microsoft have just joined amongst other sort of European industrial players. So I think there is a way to use open source with a combination of active participation of the public sector and certainly regulations. You know, I think we missed the boat, and hopefully we won't in terms of AI and the next generation, but I don't think the license is end all be all, and it goes back to creating markets and having the right sort of governance and regulation guardrails.
Thank you, Gabriele. And then David, and then we go to some questions from the audience, remote and here in the room. Please, David.
Yeah, I agree with Gabriele that it's a multifaceted problem that digital commons require to address, because as this is going to use a number of resources and most likely a number of open resources, there are questions about costs, licensing, therefore legal compliance, skills and capacity around these solutions. Governance was mentioned as well. Adoption with procurement, for instance, for governance is an essential problem, which is actually what we are presently trying to tackle in our specific program for digital public goods, but also an overall sustainability, because as we are developing things together, it's always more difficult to maintain them over time. So, and as it was said before, I think it was Adriana, no, not Adriana, but Sophie, there is an open access regime that is to be defined, but also an open resources management program for supporting these commoners to come up with their digital commons. We need to help them raise awareness on these various problems, cost, legal, complexity, and so on, and support them in adopting the best practices in getting proper training and funding, and overall to evolve regulations at the various levels so that these commons can be made common. So that is what we are trying to do on a more restricted or more narrowed area with our open source ecosystem enablement project at ITU, where we are targeting DPGs, digital public goods, in deploying a program with actual technical facilities locally to the countries that we are targeting, which are aimed to help build capacity locally to structure to support structural change, to drive the ecosystem convergence. We mentioned interoperability just before, but also to attract financing so that we can build a market, we can attract all of the ecosystem stakeholders so that they are contributing and make the overall digital commons sustainable.
Thank you, David. So I see some gentlemen there that would like to ask a question, another person here, another there, many questions. So I will have, we will not answer all the questions. You will pick up each one of the questions. So if you can say your name and go to the question.
Good evening, citizens. Thank you, Mrs. Chairman. My name is Angelos Harlaftis, Epafos Advisors. We represent always the EcoWaves movement, the pan-European and Mediterranean regional movement, which is based in direct democracy, citizen assemblies, in science and in ecology. The last 7 years we are occupied in researching and creating with our consultancy the European open source communities, because you use a terminology which is not a European. What is a digital commons? if you research in the internet, you will find only American universities and only the French Center for Internet and Citizenship. So if we want to make something about our European integrity and sovereignty on this field, on the open source communities, we have to change the terminologies to put another concept, another ideology, another spirit.
Sorry, can you come quickly to the question? Because otherwise...
If you think that is important, this I can continue. A little bit.
The question, yes.
I'll come with the question. So apart from the French state, we ask here, do you really believe that it's only a matter of money? We have the open source communities, we have very good structures on the cybersecurity, we have big companies in Germany, in Dutch, here in Belgium, in France, but if we don't put European companies inside, we have to face the Americans, the Chinese, which they are here, and they are participating to us, putting us in a bubble of theirs, not ours. So the question is, do you really believe that it's a matter of finance? Thank you.
So who wants to pick up the question? I don't think it was ever said that it's only a matter of finance from all the discussions, but if you want to give an answer, please.
I can give, I think, a bit of the answer. I think finance is thank you for the question. I think finance is an important part of it, but I think, and this is also something I didn't mention before, but I think it's very important, is it's really a collective action problem. If we, just to illustrate that with an example, I think if all these governments had worked had collectively during COVID, when we all moved online for our video conferencing and schools were even using more online tools as well, if we would have then collectively, cities, countries, invested in digital commons, in tools that were not Zoom or were not Google or were not Microsoft, instead of investing massively as we did in those other tools, we would have had a lot more digital commons as our infrastructure today. So I think collective action is really tied to, of course, funding is really an important part of piece of the puzzle, so to say.
Thank you, Sophie. There was another, a gentleman. Sorry, I go. This gentleman with the hat.
She's got the microphone.
Well, okay, then I have to start and
maybe one woman, one.
Yeah. No.
Maybe we can alternate. So hello everyone, I'm Emma Gariani. I'm working for the French Directorate of Digital Affairs. I have a question I'm curious to hear our panelists about, which is about the European Digital Infrastructure Consortium. You haven't been talking so much about it, but it could be a legal vehicle that is interesting to carry pan-European projects. What do you think its role could be, and have you already think about implementing this in your projects? In the case it's not the case, what are the barriers to this? Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. One person that wants to answer?
Well, for the Sovereign Tech Fund, I can just say that we're involved in the conversations around the EDIC to make sure that all those efforts are aligned. Maybe to put that, to make that very clear, I used to run an innovation fund before, and I think it's great to have a variety of mechanisms to support innovation. And it is even okay to have a few things running in parallel, because then you can test different approaches, you can see what wins, what gets ahead, you can plug and play between different aspects. When it comes to maintaining existing digital infrastructure or supporting commons, there is a higher level of coordination and cooperation needed, in my personal view, because it doesn't help if we rip a field apart that is already very thin, as in there are not that many people working on it. So it's really one of my top priorities to make sure that we're well coordinated when we come to those efforts.
This gentleman here, yes, here. Then we take one question here from the screen, from the remote audience.
Hi, my name is Daniel from the Towery program. I have a question for Gabriela directly, because I'm really interested to hear your perspective or the Foundation's perspective on the Cyber Resilience Act and how it is likely to impact the open source community in very deep ways.
Yeah, so, Yeah, exactly. Well, so great. I was going to keep a positive message here, but no, I think, look, we've been pretty vocal in the last year or so in terms of the, I would say, inadvertent impacts that the Cyber Resilience Act could have on the open source community. I think, of course, the goals are laudable and commendable, and I want to always start with a mea culpa from the standpoint of, as first of all, there's no one entity that can represent the open source community, and so I understand from the, policymaker standpoint, it's really complicated to have a counterpart who to discuss with. That said, yes, especially until, the latest drafts that we've seen, and clearly even in the latest drafts, there are still some holes or some major problems. But we have seen over the last 6 months the drafts improving. At this point, we think that we need to start moving into, okay, how do we actually grapple with it? Because this is gonna, likely go through in the next couple of weeks. I think what we are mostly worried is about the smaller open source projects and smaller foundations that honestly won't have the capabilities to sort of sustain the liability and sustain the requirements of the Cyber Resilience Act, and that's where we really, besides bilateral conversations and of course sort of more public awareness campaigns, we're trying to educate the community. We certainly see a responsibility as the largest global foundation. I wouldn't paint a sort of total doomsday scenario because I've seen a lot of openness, the very fact that we're here and we are on stage and opening a conversation with the different bodies in Europe. So I think we've, just to close, I think we learned a lot as well as open source communities, that we need to be engaged much earlier in the process. We need to be consulted a little more, and we have seen, especially on the other side of the pond, some really good success as open source communities being involved in the same conversations as sort of industry and technology companies. So again, I'm an optimist, and certainly there's going to be impacts on the community, but I don't see a sort of complete doomsday scenario based on the latest drafts. If that makes sense.
Could be a good contribution from an edict to actually offer collective insurance for the smaller ones.
Yep.
Just pony up the money.
Thank you, Michael. I would like to take a question that comes from the audience. How can we motivate citizens to start using software where they don't pay with their own sensitive data? And I think here it's very much about how we educate citizens, organizations to switch in the way they perceive and value their own data, because here we have a dilemma. That is, many users, as we also heard before, are willing to pay for giving away their data, but they don't trust very often other efforts which could be much more close to their needs. So what is your view?
I mean, I think education is, well, I think you've partly given the answer, right? And, but I think part of that answer is, again, because there's different, I think there's different parts of that answer, but part of the answer there is also to give the good example. And I think, and then I want to talk about the responsibility of public institutions. So in Netherlands, I'm Dutch, we have a great initiative which is called Public Spaces, where broadcasters, public institutions like broadcasters, there's many, we're also part of it, but there's radio stations are part of it, public broadcasters, like I said, I can't think of a few other organizations. But anyway, they are starting to look at how do they communicate with their audiences. What kind of intermediaries do they use? Do they use Facebook and YouTube, or do they use other tools to communicate with their audiences? And what kind of infrastructures do they use? So I think that's a really important part of it, to give the good example, to show that there's alternatives, and to yeah, like the commissioner said as well, not just to switch only when things are perfect, but to take a chance and to take steps.
I mean, I agree, but then I think, to be honest with ourselves, we're like not just citizens, we're also consumers. And when we want to use something, we're not always just thinking about like, how does this impact democracy? Or how, like, what, not always, sometimes, not always, but, you know, what I'm trying to say is I agree we should not only jump ship when it's perfect, but there's also the tyranny of convenience, and we're hard-coded to do certain stuff that saves us energy. Honestly, I think we need to take that into account, because just like waving the flag of norms and stuff will not help the field.
No, but I think it's
advance.
I agree with that.
I'm not saying you did that, but in general.
I agree, but I don't think it's about norms in that sense, like giving a good example as well. But I think that indeed the change is social cultural. And I think that we have started to identify ourselves as consumers is actually kind of a new thing, if you think about it, right?
And it works also when some company behaves pretty bad. Like, you can see how people then make choices, like deliberately say, I don't use this anymore because this is not right, and I'm going to go somewhere else and going to use their service. So.
But sorry, just... Oh,
yeah,
David?
Just David, because he's far away and we don't even see him anymore in the screen, and I feel we are excluding him. So David, please, I would like also to hear from you.
He's alive.
Maybe it's my fault if you can't see me right now.
No, we can see you now.
Well, I just wanted to basically agree with what was being said, that we are consumers, and therefore user-friendliness and ease of use is the first and foremost argument in using such mass market solutions that are not Europeans at the basis. But the issue, I think, user-friendliness and ease of use is a consequence of a massive investment in an important thinking through the business model at a couple of years ago, which I think Europeans did not do. So it's now a matter of thinking about new business models and how we can provide such services that are user-friendly, that are easy to use, that are based on European infrastructures or national infrastructures, but that are sustained with a good business model. And I think the real question is there, because we are consumers, as Adriana said, and this is the most important problem, is the business model.
Gabriele?
Maybe just try to tie it all together. I don't think I wake up and have an espresso and think about democracy. But I do think about myself very selfishly, both as a consumer and also I don't think, as much as everyone has watched The Social Dilemma, the people understand that if it's free, then you are the product. I mean, it seems unbelievably, outside of the tech bubble, seems unbelievably unclear to the average person. And so I think it's a combination of what David said. You know, we need alternatives, maybe from the public sector. You know, if there was a free Twitter from the government, I'd use it. Because honestly, and again, maybe it's because I lived in America, and so maybe in Europe you guys did better, but what the pandemic has taught me is that people don't think about the greater good. People think about themselves. You know, I have a special needs kid, and nobody cared in America about not wearing a mask, you know, because of protecting others. And so, again, I think it has to be a very selfish, we need to make it selfishly frictionless for the individuals.
Thank you. Michel?
I think it was rightly used, if you're not paying your other product, who is the buyer? And really think about who is the buyer. And for instance, if the European Commission has a YouTube channel, or I saw a LinkedIn post there, if that is the product, it is not the user. They're just the cattle being herded into those spaces. And if we really want to solve the problem, and we've seen this in the Netherlands. There was an abject group that was making lots of sexist comments and doxing women, and all of a sudden there was a revolt from the women that said, please, advertisers, stop advertising with these people. And people started complaining, and they were always making these funny, now, so who's doing the cryy sounds? And all of a sudden it was them crying, because they are essentially the governments, the companies, the people that are buying the advertising, the political parties that are now advertising for their elections. They're actually buying the herding of their voters. The companies are buying the herding of their own consumers. And so I think addressing that by leaving the wrong platform, by gracing a platform like X with your presence, you're actively hurting democracy, you're actively hurting your users, and choosing the other path, saying, well, you know, they weren't there when we started gracing them with our presence. Literally, the majority of European people wasn't on Twitter before all these public institutions went there. They wasn't there before all these companies went there. So think about who is the product, think about what is your responsibility, and then you don't have to be about this who's selfish. You take the responsibility by cutting off the air supply from those that hurt the people that you care about.
I think that's, before I give you the floor, I think it's a very complex process to pass to a modality in which we can, from one day to the other, forget about legacy, proprietary, and big tech systems, because first of all, many companies, many individuals have no skills. Open source is not necessarily trivial to be adopted, to be maintained, to be integrated within existing legacy systems. But I think you touched upon several times the fact that maybe public procurement should change. Maybe we should look at how we call for new tools in schools to be used, in research centers, in public institutions. So I think, you know, it's going to be a progressive transformation. And of course, here, your organization, your work is doing a lot to accelerate this transition. But now, let me, there's so many people. I would like to voice you all, really, but I have to pick up. There was this gentleman here, and then there's a lady behind. Okay, so those two, because our time is coming to an end. But with the coffee break, you can ask many questions to our panelists.
Thank you very much to everybody. Thank you for all the contribution. It's really nice to hear. I will be very short and very on point. My name is Victor. I represent a human-centric AI startup in Italy. I'm not Italian, but I live in Italy.
That works.
And yes, it's beautiful. So my question is more about the future perception, about artificial general intelligence. And I would like to hear your kind of take of how do you see the role of digital commons in that perception? Is it the base?
Does it need funding? If it's, no, that's really the problem. If there's no need for funding it, if it's just generated automatically and people can benefit from it.
I saw David wanted to say something about that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you for this interesting question indeed. Artificial intelligence and more specifically generative artificial intelligence, which is today becoming mainstream given its impact in the increase of productivity and competitiveness it's giving to a number of institutions using it, is really an important question that implies that we think about how we want these artificial intelligence models to be developed. Because as far as digital commons are concerned, if these become really common tools for commoners, they have to be explainable, they have to be developed in a responsible manner, and therefore they have to rely on a number of open resources that will enable their auditing, their understanding. So I think it is really important as a digital commons example, and a good example, that such artificial intelligences are being developed as open source tools. And I think just to react to Michele's point, it's not only a question of funding, because the issue at stake with artificial intelligence is that you need data and you need computational power to train those artificial intelligences. And therefore, it's not given to anyone to train a good generative artificial intelligence. It requires money, because you have to have access to large infrastructures to train efficiently those artificial intelligences.
Maybe Gabriele wants to say something, and then we take the next question from the audience.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short. How many of you have seen the "We Have No Moat" paper that was leaked by Google? No? Or leaked from Google. Well, anyway, 6 months ago, there was a paper leaked from Google that basically says neither us nor OpenAI has any moat against open source AI, meaning open source LLMs are progressing so fast on a month-by-month basis, and the cost of training those models is becoming cheaper and cheaper, that effectively they realized that they had no competitive differentiation, and that's why now they're looking at a regulatory moat that Harry is sort of hinted to. And so I really think that AI and properly open source LLMs in Europe are the sort of last hope, in a way, to kind of counter and make sure that we don't sort of continue to accumulate delay with respect to big tech. And so I think it's really important that as EU regulates AI, it's done very carefully, that we don't repeat what they've done with the CRA, or at least how we went about the CRA. In fact, you know, I'm so glad that France is taking a strong position there.
Thank you, Gabriele. Last question that stands between us and the coffee break.
Hi. So there's already been some discussion about business models, and of course how our data is the new oil because the business models dictate that it is so. There is a groundswell of attention these days on steward ownership. In Germany, they already worked steward ownership into the coalition agreement. In the UK, there's a steward ownership form. In the Netherlands, we currently have a petition at steward-ownership.nl. Please sign our petition, by the way.
Shameless
to also, create in the Netherlands a steward ownership entity forum. And I guess my question is, in the incubation of open source projects, which of course NGI is also helping out with, and NLNet is also helping out with, what responsibility would you say that we have in creating these, helping to incubate these new companies, and shepherding them gently, towards non-extractive and governance forms such as steward ownership, to ensure that our next generation of internet companies aren't identical to the previous generation?
Thank you. I would like Michel maybe to...
Okay, I think this is good to go back to the great gift that open source is, and that is that everyone on the whole planet can take the code and start something new. So I'm a strong believer in these alternative models to make them work, to have them, to find new ownership. And at the same time, I think it's an insurance policy that we need less with open source as with any other model that we have. So I think we should lead the way and show these models to people, to everybody that is working on these things. And actively we're doing that. We're actually showing, helping people to consider what kind of model they want. Instead of just looking at the startup model, look at what could be their own long-term perspective, what they want. And yeah, it is an opportunity. I don't say it's a must, but it is a big opportunity to take, because ultimately that will build new economies. That will build a social fabric and an economic fabric around these commons.
Quick last words, Sophia. I saw you wanted to say something.
No, I think this is a really important point to bring up, these alternative business models and these other alternative ownership models. And steward ownership is a good example of that. Cooperativism is another example of that. I think there is if you want to invest in the digital commons, if you want to support the digital commons, there's also this is about other practices and another economy. And I think then you have to think about the ownership model and what is, who's benefiting from it in the end. I think this is an important responsibility definitely to take.
Thank you very much, because we are a little bit, I see blinking lights everywhere. So I just wanted to say one final word. That is why we have been discussing digital commons here at the NGI Forum. What's the relation? Michael already touched upon. The NGI has been funding a lot of initiatives, more than 1,000 innovators that have been contributing to a lot of digital commons initiatives. And this goes back to the fact that the mission, and as Roberto said at the very beginning, is to rebuild those values that were at the core of the internet as it was born, which is an open, secure, and privacy-preserving by design internet that all can benefit from in a freely and autonomously way. So we wish the next discussions will be as interesting as they were in this first panel. Let me thank you, all of you, for your patience. Unfortunately, we could not take questions, not many, but the panelists were so engaging and so interesting. I could have heard them for much longer. So thanks a lot to all of you. David, merci. And see you after the coffee break.
Thank you very much indeed, Monique. You had a challenging task. There were so many hands in the room, and there were 20 questions online and many more coming in through other socials. So sorry we can't get to them all. Time is limited, but there is a coffee break now. So those of you in the room can certainly ask each other bilaterally and follow up over caffeine. Someone said even digital commons need marketing and even activists need coffee. So we will be back here. After that, you will need it for our 2 back-to-back plenary sessions on digital identity and open web search and large language models. So please join us back again at 16:25. Thank you very much for rejoining us. I don't think there's any prohibition on coffee in the room, so if you really need your caffeine, please bring it with you and take a seat, because you really don't want to miss our next panel, because we have 1 hour to talk about shaping digital identity in the Web 4 era. That is Plenary 2. I know, it's fabulous, isn't it? It's wonderful music to get us all started. We're going to talk about empowering and safeguarding individuals in the online world. And I know we're going to touch on the European Commission's 3 flagship initiatives: the European Digital Identity Regulation, reinforcing by the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure, and the Next Generation Internet. And if you were over in the far room, you will have seen videos identifying some of those projects on the big screen. We're going to look at this through the prism of the Web 4.0 era, but possibly also looking to the future as well. The panel is going to explore how these initiatives could steer technological developments towards social and environmental good, and all the warm, fuzzy feelings that we talked about on that last panel. We're going to hand over to Alex Gregg, Executive Director of the 3CL Foundation, to moderate this. So Alex, if you want to grab a chair. And we have also got a great lineup of panelists as well. Henny Bolstra is stepping in at the last minute as Daniel is unwell. So Henny Bolstra, Innovation Lead at Duo. Henny, please join us. Thank you so much for jumping in at the last moment. From Gattaca, we have Irene Hernandez, who is the CEO with a lot of background and strong opinions. So please grab the stage. Irene, we look forward to hearing your thoughts. Paul Jackson is the Director of Digital Trust from the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat, which is the Canadian government, I think is fair to say, joining us online. Thank you very much for joining us, Paul. And last but not least, from the European Commission, no panel will be complete without a representative. Maya Madrid is a policy officer with expertise in all of these three initiatives we're talking about. So thank you all very much. Big warm welcome. Alex, I know you've a fine array of questions prepared for our panelists, but I do want to encourage everyone once again to put your questions on Participy and also to put your hands up in the room when we get to that point. Please keep them short if you can, because we know that from the last panel we might run out of time. But Alex, over to you. Have fun.
Thank you. This is a panel about the present and the future. So maybe we should consider, seeing we're talking about digital commons, it takes me back a while, I'm afraid, being old. Do you remember the term, technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral? It's one of the things which I had at the back of my mind. So if I look at the title, I'm going to go through them now. Shaping digital identity, whatever that is. Credentials, whatever those are. Web 4.0, even more confusing now these days. Empowerment, good luck. Safeguarding, safety, pretty awful. Individuals, whoever they happen to be, and the online world, that's pretty complicated, and back to the internet, I guess. Technically, I'm supposed to join the dots here, or these people are going to be joining the dots between the three flagship projects, which the EU is now investing time, money, and effort into. So we're talking about the European Digital Identity Regulation, the EUDI, what we call EPSI, the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure Project, and the next generation internet. But I think what I didn't put down in terms of all of these things I was talking about was something called values. But I also want to pause on something which we don't often think about, and especially when I was speaking about, to you about next generation internet. And I want to focus just for 2 minutes about not the technology, but the next generation. I teach these guys. So yesterday, I was teaching 65 people at the University of Malta, and there were kids from Hong Kong, Erasmus students, and I've set them a project at the moment, and I'm riffing off what Roberto Viola was saying, and it's called Resisting Apathy, Addressing Generational Divides. The kind of people I'm engaging with at the moment blame my generation for not getting it right, because those of us who fell in love with the internet 20 years ago, us who started with the various Harvard Rheingolds, are now the generation of the disappointed. No, we moved on to the other side. And we can all blame it on Silicon Valley, but that's where we are right now. I also want to focus on tangibles. It's what I'm hoping that I'm going to hear at the moment. I'm saying I have a bit of a vested interest in this because I am involved in EPSI. I am involved in an NGI project. I am involved in the DC4U, which is this large-scale pilot. I'll tell you why I'm involved. I'm the father of a 21-year-old who, at the age of 17, was booted out of his home in Malta, and being a bit academic, ended up at the University of Oxford. Good luck with proving your credentials from Malta in Oxford at the time when COVID happened. And from then on, and by the way, this guy, then there was a strike at Oxford, so not all of his grades were corrected, but in the meantime he had an offer to go to Amsterdam. Good luck with getting your credentials accepted in Amsterdam, except that Oxford does have a blockchain system. And he had to pay about 20 euros to be able to get a list, a PDF, which then the Dutch had to decide whether they accepted or not. In the meantime, Jacob got a first class. But here he is again, saying, where do I go now? Do I become academic? Do I move countries? The portability of credentials, the migration of young people, is something which I think we should think about here, together with the whole notion of identity. In the old days, from a sociology point of view, identity was, I am not who I am whom you think I am. And that's something which I feel very nervous about, let alone that other people deciding who I am, because maybe I do know who I am, and I do want to have the power in my hands in terms of my credentials, which becomes a power tool in the 21st century. So anyway, I think that was my intro, and I want to start with Maya, because Maya's pretty much front line. So we're going to talk about frameworks, regulatory frameworks. So let's talk about the eIDAS framework at the moment. Why is it important? And then the one thing that most people are hearing about, which is the EU ID wallet.
Okay, so can you hear me well? Yeah? Sure. Okay, so first of all, I think that it might be good to explain what eIDAS is. So, because, I mean, we tend to talk as if everybody knows what we are talking about, but of course when we are dealing with these topics regularly. So eIDAS is the regulation of the Commission on identity and trust services. So what is this regulation about? If you remember in the very first questions that were asked you about what do you expect from the next generation internet, and there was mention, and there was very big letters there, it was the word trust. And in the end, what the eIDAS regulation does is create a trust environment for electronic transactions, either in trust services or in electronic identification. You might or may not know that we are now under the revision of the eIDAS regulation. So there was one adopted in 2014. Now we are in the middle of the, well, not in the middle, hopefully in the end of the negotiations. But it was very, very important back in 2014 because it created really a framework of trust for the internal market, and it also allowed citizens to be identified in public services with your national ID in other member states. So this was a very first and important point that was covered by the eIDAS regulation, but now the future one, it also covers the gap, not covers the gap, but really evolves into this idea of human-centric, internet human-centric identity that is also promoted in a more high level, let's say, a strategy of the European Union that is set in the digital decade. That is, we need to provide our citizens with a really human-centric identity mean that is secure and that is private for them to use it. So it is very important. It was very important at the moment, and it is also very important now because it will, let's say, be able to be used by citizens to be able to identify in a secure and really private manner.
Tell them about the wallets. Why is everybody talking about the EU DI wallet?
Okay, so I'm also recalling what was said before about we need regulation and we need tools. The wallet is a tool in the end. It's the tool that will allow citizens to identify. It's an identification means. So what the regulation says is that member states need to issue wallets to their citizens. Because if we only, let's say, we only say that, okay, Everybody needs to have an EID mean, but we don't provide with an EID, thank you, with an EID mean for citizens, then it will be kind of, let's say, only one part covered, not the two of them. So we have the regulation and we provide also the tool.
Okay, I want to take up this issue of the wallet, and I'm sure somebody will be asking some more questions about the wallet. Henny, who's obviously not Daniel, and he was literally knew that he was going to be doing this when he was on the train coming over here. But Henny is the co-convener of the EPSI, we used to call it the Diplomas Group, for all member states in Europe. One of the first applications for the European Blockchain Service Infrastructure Project was credentials, portability of credentials. So Henny, loaded question. How can EPSI support the delivery of the EUDI wallets?
Yeah, thank you, Alex, for this question. As Alex was saying, that I was on a train. I was supposed to be here as a guest and see where you end up as a panelist. As Alex is saying, I'm the co-convener of the European Blockchain Partnership, the diploma use case. And the diploma use case is, let's say, co-created through member states and the European Commission. That's a very powerful combination, I would argue. What it delivers is EPSI. It's a European blockchain services infrastructure based on European values, based on new concepts. I would not use the word technology, but more concepts like verifiable credentials, self-sovereign identity, to give real power back to the citizens. And what that entails is that EPSI is Europeans, let's say answer, the third way answer to truly establish an infrastructure where people, like Alex's son or my son, if you want to go abroad, with his ID wallet can show what he or she is worth in terms of knowledge. So how does this support the European digital identity? You could say that EPSI is one of the first where we truly, let's say, experimented, learned from the pitfalls when using blockchain technology, and know a lot more than we did a couple of years ago. That it's not only about technology, it's about semantics, it's about legal, it's about governance, all things also appropriate for digital commons. So what we do is that EPSI is now on the concept of trusted registries, decentralized trusted registries. It can be seen as one of the pillars for a European digital identity wallet. So you can envisage, let's say, the nearby future where you have, let's say, a hybrid scenario where you have centralized solutions and also decentralized solutions. And I think that EPSI is one of the most powerful answers to a truly decentralized model. And it's not only theory, but it's also covered in what we call an early adopters program. Now more than 100 actively engaged organizations, universities, public authorities, private partners, etc., to really pilot EPSI to be used in different areas. Education is one of them, but also social security is one of them. So that will be my answer, Alex.
Okay. I'm kind of interested in looking at how SMEs are going to fit in within this magic word called an ecosystem. We all use it, don't quite know what it means, really. So, Irene, if you can explain to me what your organization does, because you seem to have interacted with all of these initiatives, right? And also, I think, with Canada, because we still got Paul in the background looming there.
Sure, thank you, Alex. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. So I guess in this panel, in this conversation, I'm representing smaller innovation companies across Europe. And I would argue in particular those that have been part of the NGI community. So I'm personally a technologist, and within Gattaca, what we do is to build and offer decentralized digital identity technology. So at the core of what we do is really this belief that as we rely more and more on digital technology to do every essential aspects of our lives, that we really need an internet that it's really secure and that is privacy preserving. So I guess that our very strong commitment to open standards and interoperability has given us a trusting position as a partner in all of these different initiatives. So just for you to understand why I'm specifically here, on the one hand side, we've been accompanying the EBSI project almost from its beginning as domain experts consulting to the Commission and defining those technical specifications, but we've also provided technology to many of these early adopter projects. We were one of these very small batch of wallets that were certified, so we also experimented with that. And we're currently serving a leading role in the Vector Consortium that is contributing to the further development of EBSI. But at the same time, we were 2 times grantees of NGI, specifically of the SIF Lab project. We're currently applicants of another NGI project. I'm about to initiate a contractual relationship as NGI influencer. So I'm very, very fond of NGI and everything that it is achieving across Europe. We aim to be, of course, an eIDAS compliant solution. We're following very, very closely everything happening in the regulatory and technical aspects of eIDAS. And finally, here to link also with Paul and with Canada, we participated last year in the workshop conversations happening between ISET in Canada and DigiConnect in Europe, and getting a grasp of these interoperability requirements when we're talking about cross-border situations that do not involve Europe. So I hope to be here kind of a glued vision of all of these different initiatives, and I would say that at the same time providing some insider information of how like these smaller companies really can play a role in this whole ecosystem, being actively or directly impacted by all of this.
Okay, I want to bring Paul into the equation. Paul and I think, spoke earlier this week. I think we'd never met. And I'm also involved in looking at how EPSI can potentially be used in Canada. So Paul, your question is, why is it important for users to have international interoperability in digital credentials?
Well, the reason is because many users don't just limit their lives to just one jurisdiction. They're not just going to be in Canada. They're not just going to stay in just the European Union. Many will travel to countries around the world to go on vacation as part of their current job, or even to study or work abroad. And even when you look on the business side, they could expand to many other countries, export and sell their products and services around the world, or even import the key components and services they need from other countries. So there's a lot of travel, a lot of trade, and a lot of other activities that are across many jurisdictions. Now with digital credentials, right now, a lot of these things are relying on the physical world, but with digital credentials, this can make it faster, easier, more secure, and even more privacy preserving. So a lot of these transactions require key documents and information to be shared. If you can do that as digital credentials, this can make it much, as I said before, much easier, faster, and more secure. Now, that's only possible if there's actual mutual acceptance and interoperability between jurisdictions. If for instance, the technology is not able to talk to one another, then the digital can't work. And same with, if we can't trust each other's technologies, our digital credentials, even our digital wallets, again, we would have to revert to the physical world because we wouldn't trust the digital means. So we want to have those digitally enabled cross-jurisdiction transactions, such as travel and trade. Then we are going to need that international mutual acceptance and interoperability to achieve that.
Interoperability is a loaded word, no? And we kind of think that it's about technology, but really is this about, Paul keeps on mentioning jurisdictions, and jurisdictions often imply policymakers, governments, people within universities, for example, in terms of digital credentials, who can make or break this. People who may say, I only believe in federated, centralized databases, I will not trust the blockchain, go away, for instance. I think one of the interesting things about EPSI has been that EPSI has been built actually in the real world. Remember that when it comes to the education sector, there is no such a thing as a uniform education system across member states. Every single member state does what it does. And countries, large countries, have their own separate federated systems within that. So what I have at the back of my mind is the EU creating infrastructure as a public good, technically. Regulation coming in, looking at identity and self-sovereign identity, and in a way we haven't spoken enough about that because it's something that we kind of riff off, but saying that my identity belongs to me in the same way that the credential belongs to me, not the issuing entity, for instance. So this is where I want to come back to you, Maya, because in a way, you know, the IDAS framework, I think, still people are trying to get used to what's behind it. So how does IDAS integrate this innovation that we're talking about in terms of both NGI as the next generation internet, looking into the future, looking at what Web 4.0 is going to be doing, and these EPSI stakeholders, you know, from EPSI 1, I guess, to EPSI 2, maybe you can tell us about what's changed in digital wallets and everything else in between.
Yeah, okay, so I would like to explain a bit what is happening now and how is the development of the European, let's call it European identity framework rather than wallet, because I agree that wallet, it restricts a bit what we are talking about because we are not talking about only the application that the citizen will use, but all the ecosystem, all the participants in the system that needs to be there to be able to use the wallet. So now we are tackling with two main parts of the development. One is the legislation, the other one is the technical development and implementation. And who is dealing with this development, in fact, is as my director was saying before, it's a common effort by member states. It's not only Commission who is developing this thing, but experts from member states nominated. We ask them to nominate experts to be able to build this system that supports, in fact, in the end, the IDAS regulation. So we have the experts there, but we don't intend this to be a closed project that will only be supervised by the people that now are working in. So from the NGI part, and I can just, I'm reassured by the words of Roberto Viola before, so we need to have the input from external entities, and we need to have your input because you are the ones that are looking at the future. So for the moment, it's not, well, there's a first version of the architectural reference framework published that you can already take a look in GitHub, but it will be published further versions of this document. That is how the wallet will look like in the technical architecture, but also the reference implementation that is in implementation that is also being developed based on the architectural reference framework will be published and will be open source for everybody to take a look and to, of course, provide all the comments that you might have. And we not only welcome but encourage you to please take a look whenever it's out and to provide all the feedback that you can give, because in the end, it's what it has been said before. I mean, probably it won't be the best wallet ever when it goes out, but to make the best of it, we will need to have the input from your side. And in what relates to EPSI, I mean, this is a special relationship that we have with them, because apart from the reference implementation and the architectural reference framework that we are working on, there are also, as has been mentioned before, large-scale pilots that are working to test the wallet in different use cases. And one of the large-scale pilots, as Henny has mentioned before, is testing, in fact, the wallet with the EPSI Trust framework behind.
I'm keeping an eye on the questions, and there aren't many, but they're kind of critical, I think. One of them is about eIDAS, government surveillance systems, Big Brother watching over you, in relation to what I think the internet was supposed to be. And from my point of view, we started this whole thing about look what Silicon Valley did to us, or TikTok did to us, and we're going to do something else, I think. And so this, you know, when we're talking about, you know, this is a common critique that people who are in the regulation business don't understand technology well enough. And I'm just putting it out there, and I'm not asking you to react to it as such, but I'm also interested in the fact that you have SMEs who are involved in the process of building infrastructure as a public good. And then the second question, which again is going to bring me to Henny, is, you know, blockchain was very sexy about 3 years ago, wasn't it? 4 years ago? And then it's not sexy anymore. And I think having seen a lot of this stuff, normally when technology goes quiet is when interesting things start to happen with it. And that's my gut feeling with what's happening with the blockchain. But I think, Henny, do we really need blockchain in permissioned or decentralized systems to facilitate, again, self-sovereign identity on the basis that we're all on the same page, empowering the end citizen?
Yeah, that's of course a very, let's say, binary question. And I could say that it depends. That's the diplomatic answer. Yeah. To be honest, I'm not a disciple, I'm not a prophet about blockchain, but I think the combination of a couple of concepts, like trusted registries together with a blockchain infrastructure and the user protocols. And by the way, I'm not very into the protocol layers, but I think I do have a grasp on how they work. But I'm not an expert on that, keep that in mind. Together with verifiable credentials and together with the self-sovereign identity concepts we were talking about, it makes it a very strong combination. But is it absolutely necessary? No. You can organize it in a different way. That can be. But from in the European perspective, you can what you can do as a citizen is that by the use of blockchain, the EPSI, you can use your EPSI wallet and show your credentials and go from the University of Oxford to the University of, let's say, of Malta, of Göteborg, or Amsterdam, or the most beautiful city in the Netherlands, Groningen. Also possible. So I think the question here is that is stated here is it's pinpointing. I think it's pinpointing the technology or the protocol, and I think it's far more complex than that. It's about interoperability, and I think the combination of what I just said and the verified credentials, trusted registries, decentralized governance. I think that is truly a strong combination. So that would be my answer.
So do you always have to use blockchain? No. Do we believe in decentralization? Good question. Do we believe in self-sovereign identity? Equally good question. Key people from a legal perspective and a governance perspective. Governance normally implies centralization, doesn't it? Self-sovereign identity implies power to the end citizen. There's a bit of a tension there. And yet, sometimes miracles do happen. And some of the pious, not just within EPSI, I mean, I project managed the first nation-state use of blockchain credentials in my tiny country. And I had a minister who said, I don't care about the technology. Is this good for the end user, students? 1. 2, is the technology ready? 2. 3, who's going to be doing this? In our case, it was pre-EPSI, it was MIT Media Lab and whatever it is. And then 4, on your head be it, let's move with it and see what happens. Still in pilot stage, in a kind of small country like mine, everybody's using it in terms of we've gone from paper to PDF to somebody saying, you know, here's, check my credentials on Blockcerts, okay? But I keep on going back to the, you know, the root of the problem. On whose side are we on? Because this is something which big projects, LSPs, anything, I think, has to address. So, Ren, let's go back to you now. Because I am interested in SMEs, you know, why are you flying the flag if you're here with these big guys, basically? What can SMEs contribute to the future of digital identity? And what challenges do you see in terms of how you guys participate in delivering whatever you're doing within NGI or elsewhere?
Thank you, Alex. So I think that SMEs so far have played already a very critical role in this whole digital identity ecosystem, user-centric digital identity ecosystem. So to start, if you look at the profile of companies, and I'm talking more from the technology perspective, if you look at the profile of companies that have been working the longest in the space, they're SMEs. There's small innovation companies, startups across the world. And I would summarize the contributions so far, perhaps in 3 main aspects. The first one is that SMEs have been delivering the most mature, up-to-date technology offerings. So we're known to be more agile, more flexible, we can adapt quicker. And that's very important, believe me, in current market conditions, because specifications, standards, they're changing constantly, sometimes with breaking changes. So we really need to act quickly and deliver the technology that is being demanded and adapt it quickly to ever-changing needs. But secondly, I think that this is a very important part. We've been very active contributors and promoters of open standards. And that, for me, is essential to achieving interoperability. So we've provided experts into the market. We've worked, collaborated actively, and I can really attest to that personally, with governments, with policymakers, in ensuring that all of these that we're building is truly interoperable. And perhaps I would add that we are activists in privacy, in really advocating for a solution that is private for the citizen. This user-centric focus has been truly important in SMEs. And perhaps lastly, so far, we've been perhaps driving market adoption. We've been explored use cases. We've been educating the audience. We've been developing high-quality, specialized content, material, delivering workshops, implementing pilot projects. So that experience is really contributing to getting this market up and running. Perhaps the most timely question is, okay, like 5-6 years down the road, it is now clear that decentralized, user-centric digital identities have attracted a lot of attention from many organizations across the world. So the question is, what role should we play moving forward? What role can we play moving forward? I do believe that we will still contribute to all the 3 points that I mentioned before. Perhaps the companies that have been longer in the space and know how to execute well will grow, perhaps bigger and have a bigger impact in everything that we do. And smaller entrants perhaps try to tackle niche markets and industries, perhaps some consolidation in the market, some acquisition. It's really a little bit early to know what role we are able to do. So yeah, challenges many. Let me summarize. Like, it is clear that policy definition in the different jurisdictions, not only at European level, but then at country level, will impact either positively or negatively on the role of SMEs, either because we are creating, let's say, a competitive market of many solutions and providing choices, technology speaking to citizens, or because we're creating more a consolidated market with very few, like, approved, let's say, options. So that will impact. If I have to say very concrete challenges, I would say one is accessibility to public and private procurement processes, because if they are defined by design to have requirements such as You need to have sizable track records, or you need to have a down payment of a very large security deposit. Well, that will be effectively creeping accessibility to smaller companies, especially new entrants. But then we have other effects, like it's going to be EIDAS certification, just to put an example in Europe. Is it going to be this certification very resource consuming in terms of the time it takes us to achieve it, or the out of the pocket money that we really need to put into getting that, or resources, human resources needed to achieve it. So there are a lot of moving drivers that are yet a little bit too early to understand, because it will depend on how each different jurisdiction will react to the idea.
Second time you mentioned too early, that we need to wait kind of thing, or we need to see where we are at the moment, right? This thing about we're trying things out, we're piloting things out, sandbox status, that's...
I think we're already crossing the chasm in the sense that we've been working on pilot, perhaps non-production environments for over 3-4 years. And now we particularly are already working on production projects, like production-ready projects that are being used in real life. So we're already transitioning to the next phase.
I'm going to go back to Paul, because one of my first curiosity was like, why is Canada looking at what's happening here? Why Canada and Europe are talking to each other? But it did go back to what we mean by interoperability or international interoperability. And I would ask Paul to, explain a bit more about Canada's interest in what's happening, I guess, from this perspective, even from the perspective of the NGI. And I think, but specifically in terms of digital credentials, it's too late, almost. And one of my frustrations is there are kids all the time, traveling now, all the time, facing expenses which they don't need to have, being asked to prove that they are who they are, people not believing them. Because guess what? Universities, TVET organizations are still bastions of resistance in many of these places. I know. I work for a university. Okay? So this is what I've got at the back of my mind. Paul, why is Canada looking at what Europe is doing, and how can we learn from each other? I think this is equally important.
Well, I think a way to look at it is, like as I mentioned before, certainly from a Canada standpoint, the people in our jurisdiction, as well as the businesses, they're not just limited to doing things in Canada. They quite often will travel to the European Union, or they can engage in business there as well, and other countries around the world. So I think that's where we can't just look at it purely from the Canadian perspective. There inevitably is going to be interactions, transactions that are going to happen across our jurisdictions. So if we try to do this independently, we don't talk to one another or don't try to find alignment, then we're going to end up with these siloed solutions where, sure, it may work great within our one jurisdiction, but it's going to run into a brick wall when it goes into another jurisdiction. So I think that's not helpful, because we can't say, okay, well, I can obtain government services in Canada, but, well, if I'm going to try to travel to Europe or travel to the US, well, sorry, you're kind of out of luck for the digital side of things. So I think that's where to enable this to work digitally across borders, across our jurisdictions, we do have to work closely together, because there's kind of two key challenges to overcome here. One is going to be kind of more technology oriented. We have to be able to get these technologies to work together, and each of our jurisdictions are going to make different technology choices. But at the end of the day, it shouldn't be up to the travelers and the businesses and everything to try to navigate and make these things work together. Our jurisdictions should be working together to make sure that we can have our issue and verifying capabilities, or even our digital wallets, be able to work together, so then a user can take the wallet and then be able to then present it, Canadian credentials in the European Union. But I think there's also, as you mentioned before, this is not just a technology problem. There's also a more policy-oriented challenge here, and I think this kind of falls on trust. Like, how can a jurisdiction trust and even accept for instance, the digital credentials or digital wallets from another jurisdiction. So if, say, a Canadian traveler would go to EU, how do you trust what they're presenting? How do you trust that wallet that they're coming with? How do you trust the credentials, the digital credentials that are held in that wallet when they're trying to present the various documents they need to go into the European Union and to, say, study at a university? I think these are very good questions. And I think that we don't want a situation where, because we don't trust each other's wallets, each other's credentials, either these poor travelers, students, or workers have to revert to physical credentials, where they're used to in their own jurisdiction doing everything digital, they have to go back with physical copies of things and present them manually to go to another jurisdiction. And often, as you mentioned, it can be very difficult to get a university to accept these things, particularly since they may not have any way of reliably verifying these physical things. So I think that's where we also don't want a situation where travelers have to juggle a bunch of different wallets, that you have to get a different wallet for every single jurisdiction you're going to be visiting. You don't want to have, and even then, if we don't accept one another, we actually create the impossible scenario for users. Say they go get their credentials in the digital wallet for their jurisdiction, go to another jurisdiction. Oh, sorry, I don't accept that digital wallet. Well, then they get the digital wallet from that jurisdiction, go back to their home jurisdiction to get their credentials again. Oh, sorry, I don't accept that wallet either. We've just forced the user to fall back to the physical approach as well. So unless we work together, it's not going to work digitally across our jurisdictions. So I think, now, how can we make this better? I think as a fundamental piece, I think we need to have the ways to be able to determine what meets requirements in our own jurisdictions. I think that as just kind of the most baseline. So I think I heard mention of certification of digital wallets. So have maybe standards or assessment programs to make it easy to determine what does and does not meet requirements in each of our jurisdictions. But then we actually have to work together to align those requirements. So then if the requirements are met in one jurisdiction, they will then be met in another jurisdiction, which makes it much easier, so then the user can choose one solution. But on top of that, this comes down to the mutual acceptance and trust. It's not just good enough that these requirements, like say a digital wallet can meet the requirements of both jurisdictions. We don't want to have a lot of duplicate effort and cost. Then forcing, say, a wallet provider to get certified in every single jurisdiction. That's where, like it's done for other things in the economy, we have to have a way to be able to accept, for instance, certification. So for instance, a certification done in the European Union, maybe there could be agreements that then they could be accepted in Canada and vice versa. So then a digital wallet or other technology for digital credentials can be certified in that one jurisdiction, but then accepted in many other jurisdictions. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to work together. We can make this much easier for end users and make this much easier for those that are providing these products and services to enable this more ecosystem, this more digital future. But it only will really work if the jurisdictions such as ours work together to iron out a lot of those challenges, address the technology challenges as well as the policy and acceptance challenges. And only together can we actually resolve this and make this a better experience across our jurisdictions.
So essentially we're talking about trust networks now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yep.
EFSI is really being built on that basis, even trust registries. And it's being built on the reality of how things actually work in real life, as opposed to conceptually how should technology work, I think. Maybe that's a bit of a crude way of saying it. And that's why I think we were always arguing about what does interoperability mean. Because I do remember having arguments with people in an airport once, and their view of interoperability was the machines talk to each other. And then I said, I come from the business and education sector. Good luck. That's not the way it works. It doesn't work like that. So in a way, and I'm not saying that EPSI is going to solve everybody's problems, but I keep on going back to the real problem, which is what Paul is talking about, I think. There are people moving from one country to the other. I know, my son's just done it, and will do it again. His future is not in my country. I don't know where he's going to work in 6 months' time. And he's always has to go and prove his credentials somewhere, if there's any blessed system that can stop this rubbish of intermediaries and gatekeepers getting involved and more money being paid so that there are people in jobs staying there, you know, I think we should be looking at it as a collective. We were talking about the collective good. I think that's my 5 cents worth of it. There are some barbed questions here. I'm not even sure you know, if they can be answered, but they're interesting ones. There's one saying, member states successfully lobbied against the wallet being certified to adhere to privacy standards under the GDPR. It is now up to them, up to member states, I guess, to decide whether the national wallet will be certified for privacy compliance. I mean, how can privacy be truly protected in this context? There's something for you?
Yeah, I guess that this one is for me. So what happens here is that, of course, I mean, the idea and what is the proposal behind the European Digital Identity Framework is to create something that it's, it preserves privacy, and it also it's based on the highest security standards. So it is true that that for the moment there's no certification scheme for the wallet, because this is something at European level, because this is something that takes place, but will be in place in some, I hope, years, few. But now, until we have this certification scheme in place, it will rely on national certification schemes. But it doesn't mean that member states can do whatever they want, because apart from relying on national scheme, they will need to be scrutinized by other member states. So now, just for you to understand what we have now, when for the current eIDAS regulation, we have an identity scheme that joins the network, it should be reviewed by other member states. So this is going to happen also, until we have something common that are still under development. So this is the way that it will be, privacy will, and also security, I mean, certification will of course be looking at both things will be taking place. So there will be member states vigilating that everything it's how it should be.
I think we should take some questions here. Now, I can't see any of you because the lights are all here. I don't know. So I think we're going to need some help as to if anybody raises their hand. So Monique, I'm relying on you.
Yes, give me a mic. So
Here, why don't you take that? Because we really can't see them.
An SME that has got some digital identity, but it's based on W3C standards and not the full EBSI standards. What's the future about possibly Europe changing the W3 standards to include more of its clauses?
I can take an answer on my perspective on that. Is that standards today for user-centric digital identity do not cover the full spectrum. That's a reality. To make it even more complicated, there are competing standards doing the same thing. And it is yet not clear whether there will be one winning solution or whether we should interoperate with different standards. eIDAS specifically, the first ARF version, already contemplated W3C standards for the EUD wallet, specifically for the type 1 credentials, which are then the most sensitive ones. So I do think in general that W3C standards, specifically verifiable credentials data model, are quasi a de facto standard already worldwide, because this is the standard that is being recognized and accepted in many, many different jurisdictions already. Now, this is only data model. Then you need to look at protocols, exchange protocols, and then the story gets a little bit more complicated. For us, this is where I said that agility, like being agile, is critical now. We've been changing and adapting and opening a super modular and flexible architecture so we could really tap into the different requirements. I don't expect to have in the very short term in the whole world one single set of standards for digital identities. We'll probably have to live with a few. Same way we have to live with backwards compatibility with existing systems. And that's a reality that we need to face.
Some more questions?
Yes. Please stand up.
Say who you are.
Hello, my name is Nina. My question is, there is open source and markets that is already developing all these standards and being a bit in front already. So what do we do with this? Like, are we using any of this, or are we developing in parallel? Because there is a whole field that is underfunded developing this, and then we have now the official approach that is developing these things yet again. So I just wonder, how do these things fit together?
So the question is, are things being duplicated without being needed?
Well, in fact, it's not that it's duplicating, but member states, of course, will relay if they feel the standard fits the purpose. They will relay on existing standards. It's not that everything is brand new, and it's not, let's say, taking into account what has been developed anyhow. But I just want to remind, so it's not, if there's a standard there, if when you look at the ARF that is published, you see that there's a better way, or there's something that really could be enhanced or whatever, the community is very open to comments from the, let's say, the outside member states that are developing the European Digital Identity Wallet.
I don't know if there's another question, but there's something here which there is?
There's a couple. This
gentleman again, guys, I can't see you, so...
no problem, yeah, no problem. So hi, Cade Diem from New Design Congress. I actually wrote this in the chat thing, but I'll say it here as well. So over the past 10 years, we've seen an increase in the use of the awareness of security, and yet despite that, we see a major increase in, say, the economic damage of social engineering attacks that primarily rely upon digital identity systems. Why are we developing new digital identity systems with trust as a core focus when our primary threats are things like social engineering attacks or the data itself falling into the hands of people or governments or other institutions that weaponize that, for example, in use in genocide and things like that?
Yeah, you and I are looking at each other like...
I'm looking at you like, wow.
You're looking at me and I'm mirroring you, basically, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of difficult question.
And I'm thinking of deep fakes and things like that at the moment, which is what's freaking me out, so...
Yeah, so how can I answer this? So in fact, so the objective of the regulation is to provide and to build trust. Whether a system, it's a target of attacks, it needs to be tackled with how we protect that system and with security measures put in behind that. But of course, even though a system or identity systems would be, because I mean this is something that I really don't know, targets of attacks would mean that citizens don't need to have or to be offered an identity system that it's private, that protects the privacy, that it's secure, that enables them to access to private and public services, or to what you have mentioned a lot of times, so I can just move from one member state to another with all the burdensome that carries with me if I need to tell who I am and to be able to identify myself. So that would be my question. I mean, it was quite a difficult one.
There's one last question.
I'm Markus Romoser. I'm developing an activity observer, and so identity is of some importance here as well. I hear a technical discussion about identity, and I wonder, and even related to determining the value of a human at one point in the discussion. I found this quite troubling, this sentence. What would the life sciences and the social sciences say to such an identity concept? And what if an identity, there is no such thing as an identity that can move from scope to scope? So if the identity in one jurisdiction is not compatible with the identity in the other, should we try to tackle this as a problem, or should we just leave it? So are we solving a technical problem that's an underlying unsolvable social one?
So again,
I teach social science. I mean, I'm just a bit flummoxed at the moment, okay? Because I started by saying, I am not who I am whom you think I am, just to tell you how the social sciences looked at identity. Okay, so I think we get that. There are also a hell of a lot of people, say in places like India and Pakistan, that if they're not registered, they don't exist, I think. Within the EU, I think there is a concerted effort, I think, in terms of identity and using identity responsibly. For example, in terms of social security, that if I break my foot over here in Belgium, it would be nice that, you know, I don't have any hassle in terms of bills at some stage that I can immediately get with whatever system is going to be based, whether it's based on EPSI or something else, that this is seamless. I think that's the way I think we're seeing the application of identity. In terms of the philosophical aspect of identity, I'm very happy we can spend many hours gleefully debating it.
Sure, but I mean also it's not technical. It's not really technical because at some point technical things can be solved. It's about how we build trust.
Yeah.
Because what needs to happen for me to be able to go to another jurisdiction and have accepted whatever I deliver, it's that the counterpart trusts me in this case because it's human-centric. So first place me, and in the end, who has issued these credentials for me? So in the end, it's everything about how we build trust, how we put in place a governance that it's able to build trust between the different entities in the ecosystem that we are talking about.
We've got 3 minutes left. So this is sound bites from each and one of you. We can riff whatever you want, okay? But in terms of challenges and your vision for what can happen in the future of digital identity, and somebody here said 2 words. And you can contemplate that, but.
I will nail it down to one. For me, it's interoperability. It is the challenge, and Paul is an attestation to that. He has been reinforcing the message all along. Because in the end, if we think about why we're building all of this, is so that we as individuals can have one single an easy mean to identify ourselves, to provide the trust Maya is talking about whenever I do a transaction. But it happens that I'm an individual that perform transactions across very different industries, across very different countries along my professional and personal life. So it is a reality that if we want to do this right, we need to make this happen with interoperability at its core. And it's really not an easy problem to fix. For me, interoperability has 3 main aspects, like geographical interoperability, technological interoperability, and vendor interoperability. So I will stop it there, but interoperability is something that you need to keep in mind in terms of challenges.
Paul, I'm going to bring you in because you've been listening to all of this, and maybe you're starting to think Europe is a really complicated place compared to Canada, but.
Yeah, well, I think Canada is probably equally complicated. We've got multiple levels of government as well. But I think building on what Irene said, I agree with the interoperability, but I think it's also kind of the more trust and mutual acceptance side of things. I think these are things that we have to tackle both getting the tech to work together but also people to trust one another. Because to me, the ideal future would be where individuals and businesses can use their digital credentials to obtain services, engage in transactions across jurisdictions, using the trusted digital wallet of their choice. So it's easy. They don't have to juggle multiple different wallets, credentials across them. They can go across each of these different jurisdictions, get their digital credentials in that same wallet, and then be able to obtain those services and engage in transactions across them, which would make it very easy for someone that's trying to travel and go between different countries around the world. So for me, yeah, add on mutual acceptance, because you got to cover the policy and the trust side of things.
Henny, Maya, literally 20 seconds.
I can't say interoperability because it's said twice. So I bring in one other term, and it's adoption. Adoption by business domains, adoption by people in the field, the end users and the stakeholders. We have to have the whole system working, not only a wallet, but all the stakeholders and actors to make this a success. And it's about adoption, and it is what we truly advocate also with EPSU. We have to learn and experiment and pilot and bring it to production and to gain critical mass to get that and to get things over the top.
Maya.
So for me, I mean, and it links really what Henny is saying, it's trust. I mean, and trust means also adoption. It's not only trust of the entities that participate in the ecosystem, but trust of the people that needs to, because in the end, this is a system for citizens on what AI does take. So it's trust from every entity that is participating in the framework.
I think we're done, guys. We're 56 seconds over. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex. And I'm going to ask you to stand here for a family photograph of the panel, just so we can have that for posterity. And say well done for a very interesting panel. Fewer questions than the first panel, but possibly a bit more challenging. So let's get our photo done. Thank you very much. And unfortunately, we had Paul disappear from the background, so he's not recorded. But thank you. A warm round of applause once again for our plenary 2 panel. So we now turn to plenary 3. You'll be well used to it by the end of tomorrow. So our next panel is going to discuss open web search and large language models and beyond, challenges and opportunities for Europe. So Europe is currently piloting an open and distributed web search ecosystem to support European web search solutions. The speakers are going to talk about the challenges involved in that, the current state of play, and the potential that it offers. They'll also reflect on the challenges in setting up such a cooperative undertaking and the future developments of large language models. There's a lot to unpack, and they've only got 1 hour, so I will invite onto stage now our moderator, who will be putting your questions to the panelists, as well as asking, I'm sure, plenty of our own. Please welcome Christine Plote, co-founder of the Open Search Foundation. And joining Christine, she has a stellar panel. Isabel Klaus is Managing Director of Thinkers.ai, a serial tech entrepreneur, winner of the Europe State Award 2022, Innovator of the Year 2022 in Austria, and Austrian Entrepreneur of the Year 2020. Thank you, Isabel. Michael Granitzer, professor, has been the chair of the data science at the University of Passau since 2017. His interests are researching applied machine learning, web information retrieval, and natural language processing. Georg Rem is principal researcher in the Speech and Language Technology Lab at the German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence, or DFKI, and adjunct professor at the Humboldt University in Berlin. Alexandra Zapolsky has founded Linagora in 2000 while still a student at the Institut National de Télécommunications. The company is now regarded as France's leading open source software publisher. And long titles today. The final speaker on this panel is Milena Sokolik, Senior Project Manager, R&D and Client Relationships at Trace Labs. That's the core developer of Origin Trail, the open source decentralized knowledge graph. Thank you all so much. I'm going to quit the stage and hand over, Christine, to you. As before, those online as well as everyone in the room, please get your questions online. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, hello and welcome. We don't have that much time. I think the networking event is already looming in the background, so we will try to stick to the time provided. As you've heard, we have a great panel of experts here. And I would just like to dive right into our topics and ask Michael, because you've heard about the Open Web Index from Jen. And Michael, you are the researcher and principal investigator of the Open Web Search.eu project. Can you briefly explain what the project is about and why we need it, why we need the Open Web Index? What are you working on and why?
Yeah. Thank you very much for the questions. Hello and welcome from my side. Open web search. Well, the motivation behind is that if you look at the web search engine situation or market today, we see basically two things that do not fit together. Web search itself is a critical infrastructure, if you want to put it that way, because it is used daily by millions of people all across the planet, but also especially in Europe. And on the other hand, it's a market oligopoly. So there are a few companies that dominate that market, and they are setting the standards, and they are, in that sense, also having the finger on the information that we receive on a daily basis. And that is critical, especially for the reason that we lack, in that sense, information diversity. So we do not have the choice to choose the search engine that we want to use or that fits our needs or that has a certain setup that is interesting or for us, but we have to choose what is there. And I often compare it to think of it as having one newspaper over Europe, and or two maybe, and then you have to read what is there. Well, there are a number of very small or smaller search engines in addition, but they are also mostly driven by the index provided by the big companies and the big tech. And so the idea for the Open Web Search project was to open up this ecosystem by opening up what is the core of a search engine, and that's the web index, and to treat that as open data, so that everybody can take that part of the index that he or she wants to use and then build their own services or search engines on top of that. And that's the core idea. Alongside that is also that you need a certain kind of infrastructure that is not only important for web search, but that also drives innovation beyond web search in the whole cloud space, cloud services, cloud apps. We had it before, digital identity is there, and nowadays also large language models, and also AI. AI was part of search technology nearly a decade now for adjusting the rankings, and now we see the culmination in large language models. But the driver beyond that is infrastructure and data that is also used for web search engine. And that is what I think is critical. We need now to catch up also in Europe on that front and be able to then go beyond that, of course.
Thank you, Michael. Isabel, you're an innovator, and with your company, Think as AI, you're connecting, or you're acting on the interface of search and AI. So what do you think needs to change, or where do we stand, and why would you or maybe need an open web index as well?
Yes, good evening from my side. As I said, Thinkers AI is doing web search for companies, actually. We are looking for the relevant information instead of a millionfold information. It's exactly as you said, we don't have the choice. We have to take something that is there and it is all encompassing, basically. But we are losing a lot of very relevant information with the current search approach. And this is what we are tackling and why we need technology that is independent, actually, Because the business models, and that's always important for commercialization and for large big tech companies, the business model is basically advertisement. It means I should search for very long. That's better for the business model than if I find what is relevant. But this is very bad for the user actually, because especially for businesses, we want transparency. We need transparency in markets. We need to know what our competitors are doing, what our customers are doing, what are new business models, what is about sustainability and all that. So it keeps us a bit stupid, yeah? And the reason is the business model. And why we do what we do actually is because we want to change this. Yeah? We want to get a smarter society, and this is why we change the business model. It's very easy. But these are approaches that we, from a European perspective, think about a lot. From other perspectives, it's more important to earn much money. Yeah? So I think that we need to think about outside of this box, what is given to us as a ready-made product, and that's it. I think we have a lot of innovation in Europe that we can use, but it has to be really a different approach according to our values. And this needs, as you said, the infrastructure, the data, and this is why we are using, and we are waiting very much of more data to use from open web search.
So I think the next question is good for Georg then, because why do we need data? Where do we stand on the topic of large language models? What's missing there? What's the challenge?
A lot is missing. Good afternoon. So independence is an important aspect here in digital sovereignty. So far, this area of large language models, the likes of ChatGPT and others, it's been pretty much dominated by American players, also some Asian players, in China especially, and Europe has a few champions or hidden champions active in this area, but on a European level, from the European Union, things still need to be done. Many different things need to be done. Just a couple of examples. So for large language models, we need three main components. That's data, we need machine learning, and we need HPC to do the number crunching. HPC is great. Yeah, we have Euro HPC joint undertaking, which is doing great work.
Maybe,
the new system.
Maybe just explain briefly what HPC is.
HPC is high performance compute. And I hope that the audience of a conference called Next Generation Internet is aware of this acronym. So we have many HPC centers in Europe. The next system in Jülich is being set up now, and we have great expectations here. We need machine learning approaches. Yeah, there are a couple of frameworks that can be used more or less readily out of the box, and we need data. Data is the main ingredient. So companies like OpenAI, they don't disclose how they do this. Yeah? So they explicitly say, we are not disclosing anything. But everything is relevant here. The data composition, what kind of data goes into the model, what kind of web crawls go into the model, how that data has been curated before, how it's been cleaned up, deduplicated, in which order the data is being fed into the algorithm, and so on and so forth. In Europe, yeah, we also have access to web crawls, yeah, but this is still a bit of an issue because we don't have readily available cleaned data. So we are working on this in various projects. In our project OpenGPTX, we work on this in Germany. Other projects like HPLT, High Performance Language Technology, works on this to make data available. Yeah, we need data readily made available so that not every single project needs to do everything again, because it's a lot of effort. Just copying data on the petabyte scale from center to center takes months. Yeah. So, and this is wasted time if we don't do this in a kind of centralized way. And our project, Language Data Space, that's one of the officially mandated European data space projects, which I happen to coordinate, that's also trying to do its piece of the puzzle. Language data space will be a decentralized software infrastructure through which interested participants, as they are called, in this area can exchange data. Yeah? They can provide data, deposit data, make data available, or download data through one of these infamous data space connectors, which are then used to transfer data in a secure, legal, and safe way from peer-to-peer, essentially. Essentially, it's a peer-to-peer network, but it's a very safe and trustworthy peer-to-peer network. Yeah, and that's what we've been working on. And there's one more thing, one more acronym that I want to mention, which I don't expect you to know. EDIC has already been mentioned, European Digital Infrastructure Consortium. The blockchain one has been mentioned, the commons one has been mentioned, and there's also a language technology, EDIC, in the making right now, coordinated by our colleagues in France from the Cultural Ministry, and this EDIC is called the ALT-EDIC, Alliance of Language Technologies, which will be the very first time that European governments will collaborate on language technologies for their own languages. Yeah, this has been, we've been saying this for 15 years now, but now the penny is finally dropping. It has started dropping, let's say, that we need to develop technologies for our languages actively, because no one else will. Yeah, we have to do this actively. And the EDIC will hopefully start early next year.
Thank you. So apart from, we've heard now, we need alternatives and we need data urgently. Apart from that, Milena, what's your take on what is needed, or where do we stand? So your company builds open source decentralized knowledge graphs and is also part of the ChatKG project. And the project is also about privacy and trust. So,
good evening, everyone. Yes, one of the greatest challenges we're facing at the moment is data provenance and misinformation, which existed already before AI, but with the AI, this challenge has become even greater. And when it comes to large language models, we know that they are generative, they are transformers, they provide output based on the prompt they receive. And we could say that they're really good guessers. But issues that we are facing are related to trust. Just generating answers is not enough. We need trustworthiness. So what we do is at Trace Labs, we are building a trusted knowledge foundation, which tackles such issues of misinformation and solves trust, whether we're talking about AI hallucinations or fraud in the supply chain. So unlike other large language models, we also use decentralized knowledge graph and large language model, which basically we use decentralized knowledge graph here basically enables the extractive question answering, which means that answers are retrieved from the knowledge assets that live on the decentralized knowledge graph, which provide trustworthiness and accuracy of the information of those answers.
Thank you. And Alexandre, you are actively promoting open source. We've heard a bit about that already, and and the idea of a third digital way. So I think that also connects very well with the alternatives Michael told us about. And you have launched the Open LLM France community this year with the aim to develop a French sovereign open search LLM. Can you tell us more about that and why we need it?
Yeah. So yeah, it works. So first, good afternoon, everyone. I'm super pleased to be here. I don't know, before to answer to your question, I just would like to emphasize about what I heard this morning, in the beginning of the day. It was not this morning, it's late, I'm sorry. What the General Director, Roberto Viola, said. I mean, I was absolutely impressed by his vision and what he said. I don't know for you, but I was super glad about what I have heard. I just wanted to mention that because I think I didn't know that someone from DG Connect had so strong view about, I mean, the big challenges of digital, AI, and it's great that this guy is is the head of DigiConnect. Yeah, saying that about what we do in France and OpenLLM France community, we decided a couple of months ago to start this initiative. I mean, this big movement of AI, there are so many people, they speak about open something or open source AI. And we thought, no, so we need to act in artificial intelligence landscape like we do in open source since 25 years ago. I mean, as a true open source player. It means that we need to build a community bottom up and not top down. I mean, the approach of OpenAI, of course, now we know it's not open source. It's absolutely fake open, and it's absolutely the wrong way to deliver this promise. And so we thought, let's do that very simply. So we did a manifesto. We published this manifesto on GitHub, and we proposed to anyone that wants to join, and we have now more than 400 members of OpenLLM France. And what I think that we should do altogether, of course, is to build OpenLLM Europe, because there is absolutely no reason that our discussion at the French level will be different than what we need to discuss in each of our countries, and also all together. So one of the main, I think, issue that we have for the next coming months, and maybe NGI could support such kind of initiative. I mean, I don't know exactly the way it could be done, but we need to have like a platform, an organization where the open source AI communities from all over Europe could discuss all together how to tackle the challenges of open source artificial intelligence. And so we should do that one more time all together. We started to discuss a couple of weeks ago in Munich. We went with some of our friends from all over Europe to join this initiative started by Andreas, a German guy. He organized in parallel of DLD AI Summit, this meeting at the European scale. And a couple of days ago, so it was round 2 in Versailles, during an event organized by, I think, Holland, Netherlands robotic AI organization. And we need to follow this initiative, this path, and try to work all together, because in the same time, at the government level, they have started to understand that they need to cooperate as well. So one agreement has been signed between Direction Générale des Entreprises from France and their counterparts in Germany and also in Italy. It's absolutely new, it's a couple of days ago. So, but we should not let the government try to design the future of AI without us. I mean, we are the ecosystem, we need to work with the governments and to understand how to do that. And then, so we should advocate for having more support from our national organization, of course, but also from European organizations. At the national level, so we are super lucky because in France we have absolutely a strong support of our President Emmanuel Macron. He made absolutely a brilliant speech. I encourage all of you to go to see that, it's online. He said very clearly, and I think it's the first president in the world who said that so clearly. He said, I want to be clear, French government support open source, AI, he didn't say AI, but it was understandable. And he said, I want to underline that, we love open source. Oh, come on. Did you already heard something like that from one president in the world? Never. So, he's a true leader. We are super lucky because now in France there is absolutely a momentum. You know that there is this company called Mistral that raised 100 million. I think they are going to announce a new fundraising of 300 millions. There are some US companies, they have decided after to raise their Series A to move to Paris. Meta with Yann Lequen does also tremendous things in France. So there is absolutely something that's happening in Paris. It's great for us, but we are still not at the right scale. In the president's speech, he has announced a program of 50 million euros to support the open source AI ecosystem. It's absolutely great. Thank you for that. But the call, the public tender, it's not public tender, it's public call to receive offers from the ecosystem. So more than 80 consortiums they have answered with a demand that exceeds 600 million euros in terms of financial help. So from one end, 600 million euros, but I mean a pocket, a wallet with only 50 million euros. We are even not at 10% of the need of the ecosystem. So we are not at scale in France, at the European level. So it's great. Next year is going to have a new call for 30 million euros. How much we are going to compete and to work all together to say, hey, please help us to finance our model and so on. Of course, it's going to be like we say in France, la foire d'empoigne. It means that we all want to go in the same place in the same time. So no, it will be a problem, of course. So all together, we need to plead our decision maker and to say and to deliver them a simple message. AI is absolutely the most important things that happen in digital area since, internet. It's a huge challenge, and we need, in front of this huge challenge, huge support from our national government and from the European Union.
So a joint approach, I think what Michael said, and Georg also, a joint approach is necessary.
Yeah, you can applaud if you want it. Why not? We need energy.
And also the bottom-up approach is in common. Okay, so we heard about like a joint approach. We heard about the lack of money also, and about the challenges in general. Now I would like to hear a bit more. How can we improve, and what does it take to bring Europe forward into that matters? And I would like to ask Georg. So. As a speech and language technology expert, is there any? Some people see that Europe's landscape of languages is a hindrance for technology. Can it be also benefit? Do we have is that also a strength, European strength, maybe?
Absolutely. I will try to keep it short because you need to stop me if I go on for hours, because I've been working for this for many, many years. So Europe's multilingual landscape is one of its biggest assets. Yeah, it's a great asset. It was a fantastic idea to put into the EU treaty that all languages are equal in the European Union, that there is not this one language that is better than the others or needs to be spoken and favored. But this multilingual landscape also creates issues. Yeah. Cultural differences, linguistic differences, there are language barriers that need to be overcome. But by now we can do this with language technologies for some of the languages, not for all of the languages. We have 24 official EU languages in Europe, about 60, 70, 80 regional minority languages, depends on how you want to count them. Some of the unofficial languages are even bigger, have more speakers than some of the official languages. Yeah, so let's look at Catalan, which is a co-official language in Spain with millions of speakers compared to Maltese, for example, with a couple 100,000 speakers. But still, Maltese is the official language. So there's a bit of a tension here in terms of technology development. We did various studies over the years. Most recently with the EU project European Language Equality, we had a good look, we developed a metric, and we found that this is not a big surprise. English is supported by far the best in terms of data availability, data resources, tools, libraries, and so on. There's a graph that we produced, which I can't show you right now for technical reasons, obviously. Yeah, but then after about half the bar for English, there's a trio of English, Spanish, French, and German, with good support, but still only about half of the support for English. Then there's a lot of nothing, and then the long tail starts with Finnish, I think, which is traditionally one of the well-supported languages, Finnish and Dutch and some other languages. So, and for many of the official European languages, like Irish and Maltese, there's almost nothing in terms of data resources, technologies. They are struggling a lot. Yet, in the European Union documents, it says all languages are equal, but clearly they are not. So we've been doing some educational workshops in the European Parliament. Then a couple of years ago, a document was published, a resolution, Digital Language Equality in the Digital Age. So there's now recognition for the topic, but yeah, the last remaining step is still missing, and that's investment. Yeah, we need investment. We need the EU to invest in these topics. We need data resources for all these languages. We need technologies for all these languages. Some countries are already investing, like Iceland, not a member of the European Union, but they are doing this. Spain is investing a lot, hundreds of millions, into technologies for the Spanish language. I think their ambition is to position Spanish as the second language after English in terms of digital technologies. And this is what Europe needs to do on a grander scale. We did the math a little bit in the project, and we came up with a number of about 800 million euros that need to be invested in all our languages to make them digitally safe in a way. So no, it's not a hindrance, it's a great benefit, but this great asset of multilingualism in Europe that needs to be supported digitally, technically, and for this we clearly need to do something. Yeah. So, and we have the project European Language Equality. There's a book if you're interested. It's available open access. Obviously, we had a sister project, European Language Grid, in which we develop a European language technology platform which can be used. We have almost 18,000 resources in this, which you can check out with many different technologies and machine translation engines and so on. We now have the language data space, we have the EDIC, so things are moving in the right direction, but we need to really increase the speed, and we need to significantly increase the investments. Otherwise, the ship has sailed.
Thank you. So preserving the languages and also getting them as a benefit, using them as a benefit. Okay, Michael. Large language models, or languages and large language models. A common question since the launch of ChatGPT is, do we still need search engines? What can search engines do better? What's the difference, and what can we do to improve it?
Well, basically, I can understand that from the outside surface that search and large language models look a bit the same. Yeah, you type something in and get information out. But underlying, they are completely different concepts, or because search is finding information that has been stored somewhere, so the information is already there, and you know the source of the information. While large language models, as pointed out by Milena, they are generating new information, or information, yeah, they're generating information that they have been trained on previous sources, but the information is not genuinely stored somewhere, but generated on the fly. That is a nice thing. I think it's a wonderful technology, but it also comes with problems. Milena pointed out hallucinations. We also know if you used one of those, they can do some math, yeah, so they can do some number crunching, but sometimes they can't, so you can't rely on that. Sometimes they do a very nice logical reasoning, but sometimes they can't. So the problem with that is that there is a high degree of uncertainty on using them just as is. That's why I'm tending to think more of large language model as a very genius interface technology that can understand human language, understand under quote, and can translate this understanding to other languages, like computer languages, yeah, for programming, for example. Yeah. And I think if you did them that way, you can also see how they will work. And as Milena pointed out, they work, for example, in a retrieval setting on taking your human language, deciphering ambiguities, then creating a search query, searching a search engine, getting curated or good information, hopefully, and then summarizing the information and presenting you an excerpt or a summary of that. And so I think that are particular use cases that we see more and more in the future, not only with search, but also with other systems that have specialized languages. As I pointed out before, search and large language models have a lot in common in the sense of how they are developed and how they are trained. And there are, as Georg also referred to, we need a lot of data for both of them. You know, we need the infrastructure for both of them. And both of you referred to, we need data, we need money, and I would also say we need a lot of human brain for getting that in a joint effort work together, because building such an infrastructure has a lot of technical details, and it's not trivial to solve that. So we need a lot of bright people to build that, and we need this infrastructure so that the bright people also stay in Europe and can develop those technologies. I think keeping human capital by building such infrastructure is essential. Otherwise, a lot of people will leave abroad.
So also, you want to join in? Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to react about this because we discussed also a little bit before, and about the challenge, the cultural challenge, and the place of language in artificial intelligence. I would like just to share with you two quick examples about that. The first one is one of the most famous AI that exists. When you ask it to this AI, what is the capital of Taiwan? The answer is Beijing. So you can understand where the problem comes from. And tomorrow, I mean, all the students, the young generation, they are going to use AI to go through internet and to understand the world and to learn, and they are going to do their education with AI. I mean, last time I asked to my team some question about who are using AI, I mean, on personal way. And one of the guys, so it was in Vietnam, said to me, oh, last time, Alex, I was with friends and we were drinking beer, and I had to go back to see my wife, and it was late, and I wanted to find the excuse. So he has asked directly to OpenAI to find for him some excuse to his wife. I mean, just imagine how much today AI is in everyday life, and especially in these, I mean, growing countries. It's not developing countries, it's growing countries. I'm sure that most of the decision makers today, they don't completely see that. My second example is more like pragmatic things, or it's, I mean, last time, one of our researchers in Inagora, Julie Hunter, so she's American, but she lives in France and she works with us in Inagora, Toulouse. And I discussed with her, and she was making a presentation for students from Polytechnic school. And I saw the screen and I said, what is it? Oh, I showed them what's the problem today about language in some AI solution. And so it was Mistral, but I mean, I think it's the same with some others. And Mistral, like Llama, you know that Llama, there is only 0.12% of French in terms of data set in Llama 2. I mean, it doesn't represent like French as a fourth or fifth language in the world. I mean, and so if you ask the recipe of bœuf bourguignon, which is one of famous French recipes, maybe you know bœuf bourguignon. So the answer that you are going to have is an answer in English, based on an English version. So of course, it's not the way we cook bœuf bourguignon. It's inspired by, because you can find that in Mistral. It's inspired by a famous American woman cooker, and so that's not what you want. I mean, it's exactly where is the place of culture through AI, and so we need absolutely to stand for that, because we absolutely need to have our European culture inside AI, and because we don't want that tomorrow the only way to access to internet, to understand the world, and especially for the youngest generation, will be only through the eyes of the American culture, or worse, maybe Chinese culture. And it's absolutely essential, and we should be absolutely all working on that. I mean, and one more time, I'm not sure that we are exactly at the right level. Second point, about data sets. So yes, it's true, we need data sets, but the beauty of the things is that we have a lot of public data sets in Europe. In each of our countries, we have public agencies, administration, public television, public radio, television, National Assembly, that they have recorded everything. They have done amazing, tremendous digitalization of their archives, and data exists. The only problem is how they could bring that to the open science and open source communities, and in the way that we could train our model based on this very good data and annotated data and so on. And one more time, so I plead for having in each of our countries, so I'm going to start because everything starts I think at the national level. So we need to have in each of our countries public agency that their goal is to gather all these public common data sets and to allow any open source researchers to use this data. And we need, of course, to do that also at the European level. I don't understand, we adore agencies in Europe. So why we don't have the European Agency for Commons? It could be, by the way, one of the purpose of this European Agency proposed by Ambassador Verdier, and it's, I think, one of the things that we need to tackle in the coming months, and we need all to push in that direction, I think so.
So more joint efforts also there. Also the diversity that needs to be preserved, and also, Melina, the diversity of business in Europe is special, I think. What role does R&I and SMEs play there? How can they benefit, and what can they bring for Europe?
Well, from the perspective of SME, I think we have a pivotal role in developing LLMs for the future, but also within the context of European values like trust, sovereignty, open source. It is important that we tackle the issue of trustworthiness, as already mentioned. We should and we could do that. Also, one of the characteristics of SMEs is agility and quick adaptation to new challenges, especially when it comes to technological developments. And we should leverage this as a competitive advantage, and every organization should be included in the knowledge economy enabled by AI. Speaking more in general, AI, of course, large language models is a topic, but yeah. It is really important to collaborate. I would like to address collaboration between SMEs and research, because I think that SMEs are really good in translating research translating research to market needs, and so the advancements are not visible just in research in academic sphere, but also we can show that it can be advancements can be also applicable somewhere else. Also collaboration in terms of open source. I mean, in Europe we have, I think we have a really good conditions to leverage this environment for greater cooperation, join and encourage initiatives and to create environment where we could develop large language models that are basically transparent and innovative. But I would also like to emphasize that the main tasks of the SMEs are that we should protect our knowledge, and we shouldn't allow to be driven over by the latest advancements. And SMEs that are not using AI yet should get closer to it, and also developing everything that is related to LLMs and AI.
Thank you. Isabel, I think that's something also that fits for you, but how we have seen all those initiatives and seen the role of SMEs, and we can see that something happens. So what is needed now for the economy to participate, and what is needed to avoid remaining stuck in research and in projects?
I want to reflect a little bit on what we heard. I think it's most of the times underestimated the business value of what is currently happening. The business value not in the future, but already today. Because what is happening in this field is it's not simply large language models or not a very simple example. It's really going deep into business value creation. This is the second step after launching these models. That means if it's with regard to language or other things, we are losing out a lot and very quickly. So time is extremely important. I have to say, I think we lost 15 years already in this field. So it's not going forward. It's just looking back. It didn't happen last year. It happened 10, 15 years ago that things started up and we simply ignored it. Yeah? So there is the problem, and now we are here and still thinking about small changes or so. We really have to open up in Europe and to say we need the investments. We don't have only investments in technology, but also in marketing all these technologies. So this is a big thing. Something doesn't come to international markets without really big investments in the business side. So I think it's really time to get up and speed up things, to look around what we have and what we can do with the businesses and with the research that is already there. It's no time to start things again now or to start from scratch.
There is the example issue is absolutely a good example of that. I mean, it's absolutely a good decision to join efforts at all national level to build exascale cluster for doing computation. It's good, absolutely validated. But from the moment the decision has been taken, the moment the exascale has been financed, and the moment that it will be switched on, that is going to happen maybe in the best scenario now in 12 or 18 months, because we are still building some of the cluster, I mean, to connect that to the electricity plug and so on. I mean, it's too slow. And so that's why I do think that we need from now to ask to work on the zeta scale, which is the next generation of cluster that we will need in 18 months. And even if we don't still have the exascale now, I mean, ready in production, we need absolutely to convince decision makers, I mean politicians, because it starts from there, to decide this zeta scale program and to start to imagine how they are going to finance it and to take decision to invest in it, because the time, we need to reduce the cycle of the loop. I mean, we are too slow, it's absolutely true. I mean, I'm 100% with you. And also, maybe where NGI could play something, I mean, in that field. Because NGI works, I mean, it goes fast, this cascade funding works absolutely well, but I mean, we need NGI that invest more in AI, LLM, and we need to have maybe also bigger amounts and bigger support, because NGI is one of the smallest programs from the European Commission. It's one of the best, but it's one of the smallest. So we need to be, yeah. I mean, all people, they have touched NGI, we are all agree. I mean, it works. So we should go faster and bigger, and absolutely with you on that.
So, yeah, time is a good keyword, actually, because we have to wrap up this round and then open up for questions from the audience. Alexandra, so you had some wishes already, but just a quick round to wrap up. If the EU ferry granted you one wish, so what would this wish be? What would you wish for? Just one quick.
Act as scale. We need to change tremendously the scale we act. And I will let act as the speed we need for someone else.
Okay. Milena, what is your wish?
Well, we live in a world overwhelmed with information, and we need more trusted data, and a solution for that is to focus on decentralized AI.
Okay. And Georg? Oh, we have another.
Yeah, we need to act quickly and fast and decisively. A few months ago, we finished a study by the German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence for the European Parliament. They wanted to investigate if it's feasible, technically feasible, to build a European streaming platform that would connect all the public broadcasters and private broadcasters of Europe, so that everybody can watch any program in the language of their choice. Yeah? So that would entail speech recognition, translation, maybe even adjusting the lip movements dynamically to the then translated new synthetic speech signal, which is great. And obviously we did the study and we found, yes, it's technically feasible. And we added a little nugget, and that nugget refers to data. So we sit on lots and lots of data that is there. We know it's there because we produce the data, public broadcasts, radio, podcasts. There are thousands of podcasts being produced in Europe, but it's inaccessible right now. And often people say, oh, legal reasons, copyright, there's a lot of hand-waving going on. And to be frank, I'm fed up with this. We have the data. No one is interested in republishing the data, but we need the data to train our models. That would be an absolute game changer if we had a continuous, maybe even daily supply of fresh data in all our languages, covering all the different, maybe even public broadcasts only. Already that would be great, yeah? Publicly made, high quality curated data, which we could then infuse on a daily basis in our language models. That would solve many of the hallucination problems, many of the misinformation problems, and this needs to be done. So if we go with this to the European Union, that will take about 10 years to get this done, and I hope it won't.
Okay, so the wish is also for speed. Yes. Isabel, what's your wish to the ferry?
I wish that we do some bold statements and not only a few words and nice words, but really some bold statements also from politics and investments, because it triggers a lot in the private sector. That's what we see. Just last week, a big investment of $500 million at least was done in Germany in AI. This triggered so much from other sides, from other players. They now feel that they have to act, and I wish that really more of such bold statements happens, because it triggers a lot in the whole society and economy.
And Michael, so.
Yeah, well, before I try to summarize that in one wish.
I know it's hard.
Yeah, that's for sure hard. But I think also what has not been maybe discussed enough is the role of the open source community itself. Because on the positive side, one has to see how fast the open source community catched up with the development. OpenAI released ChatGPT, I don't know, in November last year, and suddenly the open source community released model after model that is nearly on par with something at a completely ridiculous cost comparison compared to what the investment was in OpenAI. Yeah?
That's maybe also the question of marketing, right? It's
Yeah,
not that
I
well
think
marketed.
Marketing is, of course, also part of the story. So, and now if I have to wish, I don't have a special wish, I just want to reiterate the wishes that have been already there, namely act fast with market perspective by empowering these kind of innovative open source SME community and also the researchers, and I pointed to Milena, that would be the wish, without any bureaucratic hurdles or legislative bindings.
Okay. So I think now we can hand over to the audience. There's a question over there.
Thank you. Does it work? Yeah. Yes. Alessandro Bacciaroni from the Lisbon Council. The panel was very interesting and the whole first day. My question is regarding open source. Do you think that Nordic, Baltic countries, Eastern countries, within and without and outside the EU are engaged enough? Do you think there can be something else that can be done better from the Europe or the center and west, but also from their side?
Okay.
So, Finland is part of the Baltic countries, or for you or not? Not really?
Nordic.
So let's use this example, because they released today Toro, which is their new LLM model, open source, totally open source. And so they do absolutely amazing job there. So the Finnish open source AI community is absolutely dynamic. So I think they are absolutely engaged, they move fast. I had the opportunity to be on Slovene television yesterday, and now I know that in Slovenia, so they are also moving fast in AI, they are super interested in that. So no, I think that, and that's the beauty of open source. I mean, open source has no border, and so you can engage anyone from everywhere in Europe. And let me just share with you one point, because I will regret if I don't say that. So we released 2 days ago our new open source AI model called Claire, like the female name, Claire. And I mean, all engineers, they choose male name, Gustave, Alphonse, Arthur, and Philibert. And so it's great to have also, woman name as a AI. And Claire is dedicated to health, santé. And so anyone that wants to contribute and to increase the capacity of the model is more than welcome. And about the velocity of open source community is just amazing. So we released Claire without any chat. And in 2 days, someone, that part of the community, bring Claire with a chat, like we have a chat Claire now. It's absolutely amazing. And open source is tremendous.
So I hope it's not only the name of the model, but also that you have women working on that.
I say Julie, for example. No, we have women.
So next question over there.
I have a question. So there's a worst case scenario that's at the same time maybe mathematically certain to happen, is that there will be AI managed capitalist companies that will be fighting each other over their patent wars, and there will be no people working in these companies. They will build so many data centers with solar panels on the top that the humans will just be moved off this planet. And so, I'm scared of that, I think capitalism combined with AI is gonna bring on something like the Matrix. And we'll all be in our pods controlled by these. Do you think open source can change anything in that?
Well, yeah.
That's the only answer.
It's hard to see into the future and what future brings. There are utopia and dystopia scenarios. We don't know. Yeah. But I think you cannot blind your eyes before the technology and give away all your competences in a certain technology or in working with the technology in order to understand how you counteract certain developments that are not going along our values. And that can only happen if you have smart people who understand the problems, understand the technology, and then can work according to values we have in Europe. So that's why I think open source is an answer to that, because it enables people to be knowledgeable about those systems and be able to work with that.
Yeah, maybe just a quick addition. I have never understood these doomsday scenarios, and I probably never will. AI models are software. Yeah? If we don't like the software, we will switch it off. Unless anyone thinks that it's a good idea to, I don't know, attach a nuclear rocket arsenal to ChatGPT or so, and then accidentally we will destroy the world. I guess no one will do that. Yeah, and none of this will happen. Pay attention to who is doing the doomsdaying here. Yeah, who's saying, oh, there's a elementary threat to humanity and the planet. Pay attention to who is saying that, and then think about why they are saying that, and then you will get there.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. I'm not sure who was first, sorry. in the front here.
I think your comment there, AI is just software, just got me thinking. We had an AI safety summit earlier this month. There's an AI security summit later this month. We've got problems with software and cyber and keeping it secure. How do we manage this increasing complexity? Because we're getting more and more data. Have we got the tools to understand, manage that complexity and ensure it's secure for our citizens?
Coming a bit from a cybersecurity background for a couple of years, was one of the very few technologies developed in Europe that my former company and my team developed. I think it was always a race between the good and the bad. It will never change to be that. Definitely it will be more complex. Not only thinking about disinformation topics and all that technology and cybersecurity doesn't touch yet at all. Also going to quantum and other technologies that are coming up. So I think the race is on. We also need in cybersecurity much more European technologies. This is out of question combined with AI. I think, yes, it's a real-world problem already now, especially disinformation. It won't go away, and we should also hurry up in this field. There is no better answer.
Okay, so I think we are running out of time now, but I think we have heard of lots of ideas and initiatives and also the challenges, but I think we can, and there's no need for doom thinking, so I think that's pretty good. And then drinks and networking are waiting. I pass over to Jen.
Oh, there we go. Thank you very much. Well done on managing such a packed panel with so much insightful speakers. That was really impressive, Christine. I can see that people are starting to feel a little bit tired in the room. We've had a diminishing number of questions as the day goes on. I think that's not because your topic is lacking the questions, but because people are feeling a little bit tired. So I'm not going to stand between you and your networking and your cocktail reception, which will take place outside here. Please do take advantage of the opportunity to do that networking that we do want people to do and have those communications. To those of you online, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for all the questions that we've seen you putting and sharing with us through Particify. Be back tomorrow. We will be back here in this room, and that goes for everyone here present as well. We will start off tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock with an overview and another icebreaker question and nice little jingles that I hope everyone will appreciate. And then we will have some impact stories from some of those real contributions from the NGI innovators. They have been showcased and put together a nice wide section to give you a real flavour of it by the DG Connect team. So don't miss that. That'll be starting at 9:10. We have another couple of plenary sessions. We'll be talking about securing the open source frontier and navigating supply chain risks. Expect to hear a lot of talk about third parties. And then we will have a final plenary on decentralized social media and the Fediverse, which, because someone is ill, I'm stepping in to moderate, and so I'm really relying on everyone to have lots of great questions for me. We've got good speakers, so hopefully you have lots of thoughts on that. So do join me again tomorrow. Don't forget your badges if you're here in the room, because you will need them, and have a lovely evening to those online and in the room. Thank you.